Chapter 564. She shouldn't have provoked Xiao Qing from the start. Xiao Qing wasn't someone she could afford to provoke. However, it was too late to regret now. The mistake had been made and the hatred had been formed. It was such a deep hatred that it couldn't be resolved. Fu Jinling was in despair. She even started to hate everyone, including Lin Qifan. If Lin Qifan hadn't taken the initiative to seduce her, would she have fallen in love with Lin Qifan? Would she have done that to Xiao Qing? She hated her parents. If they hadn't ignored her, would she have thought that money could settle everything and cause that car accident? As for Xiao Qing, her hatred was lighter. It was more regret and despair. Xiao Qing couldn't be bothered to think about what Fu Jinling was thinking. She temporarily handed the job of receiving people at the door to someone else. Then, she took Mu Lin and her group back. When she went back, she sent someone to call Tang Tiande. Tang Tiande was her underling. It would be a waste not to use him. When Tang Tiande came over, he saw two women sitting on the sofa. They were surrounded by men. None of them looked bad. "Boss, why are you looking for me?" Tang Tiande had just finished his work. After everything that had happened, he had become more open-minded and had improved a lot. Especially after being oppressed by Xiao Qing for so long. When he returned to the base, even Tang Yaozu was surprised to find that his son had become successful. Of course, what followed was complicated work. Tang Tiande expressed that he was happy and in pain. Xiao Qing picked up Fu Jinling, who was tied to the side, and threw her at Tang Tiande's feet. Then, she said, "This is my enemy. I know that you have a lot of tricks up your sleeve. I'll hand her over to you. I only have one request. Make her live a life worse than death, but she won't die." Tang Tiande couldn't help but shiver. Then, he had a deep admiration and pity for Fu Jinling, who dared to offend Xiao Qing. He had never seen Xiao Qing hate someone so much. Live a life worse than death, but she won't die. TSK. Tang Tiande shook his head, his face full of fake compassion. Then, he was kicked out by Xiao Qing. "Hurry up and take him away." Tang Tiande hurriedly said, "Boss, don't worry. I'll make sure she suffers more pain than death, but she won't die no matter what." After that, Tang Tiande took them away. After he left, Xiao Qing asked Mu Lin, "Where did you go after you left?" "I almost walked through the entire Celestial Empire. Maybe it's fate, but I didn't meet you. Do you know? I was in despair, but I didn't expect that we would meet again after I lost all hope." Mu Lin lay in Xiao Qing's arms like a child. After a while, he asked, "Is this your son?" Xiao Qing nodded and said to the man beside Mu Lin, "Are you Mu Lin's friend? Chiyue, take this gentleman out for a walk. Take Hanqing Er Dai and Bao Bao with you. I have some private words to say to Mu Lin. Shaowen, you go first. Just take it as familiarizing yourself with the base." Mu Lin said lightly. The man nodded and went out with Yan Chiyue and the others. After they all left, Xiao Qing said, "Actually, I'm not a human anymore. When the car accident happened, I should have died. I didn't expect to meet the end of the world. I'm lucky to have kept my life. However, my son and I have become zombie-like." She said helplessly, "Actually, I should say that we are zombies." Mu Lin was surprised, but there was no fear. She curiously came over and touched Xiao Qing's belly, then touched Xiao Qing's face. Finally, she touched Xiao Qing's body from head to toe before reluctantly letting go. She said in a surprised tone, "It's really cold. There's no heartbeat. It's amazing." Chapter 565. Xiao Qing looked helpless. "Even if you are not afraid, can you pretend a little and give me a sense of achievement?" Mulin immediately acted exaggeratedly, so pitiful, so scary. I am so scared. Xiaoqing rolled her eyes and said, it is all in the past. I am now in my friend's base, Jiang City. Most of the zombies there are there, but it is very peaceful and no one will disturb me. I saw the 3 handsome guys beside you. Mulin winked. Did you get all of them? Speaking of the 3 of them, Xiaoqing's mood was much better. The taller and stronger one is Yan Hanqing. He is also a soldier and has a tender face. The one beside Jing Tai is Dai. He is also a zombie, but he is slowly recovering his memory. The last one is flirtatious, Yan Hanqing. After some time, when Dai recovers and there is nothing else, we will get married. Mulin was very envious. Why are there so many handsome guys here when it comes to you? I want one too. What about your boyfriend? Xiaoqing could not help but pat her head. I remember that your boyfriend is not the one beside you. He is dead. Mulin was a little sad. When I found him, he was already a zombie. I killed him myself. I know that he would not want to become such a monster. My condolences. Xiaoqing patted her head. The apocalypse was like this. The separation of life and death always came so fast. No one could predict what would happen in the next second. I have already accepted it. Now I am living a good life. Mulin smiled. At the beginning, she was probably in despair. When the most painful period was over, the scars would slowly fade. People should always look forward. Of course, living in memories would only bring about pain. So, that's Xiaoan, is he your new boyfriend? Xiaoqing comforted Mulin and quickly changed the topic. Mulin said lazily, he is not my boyfriend. At most, he is a boy toy. I met him in the last base. He is good-looking and has a good life. I don't have a companion, so I temporarily let him stay. It is easy to be lonely when you are old. Just consider him as someone to relieve your loneliness. Xiaoqing nodded and did not say anything. She had to live her own life. She could not arrange anything for Mulin. She could also see that Mulin was hiding some bad things from her. If there was no accident, Mulin would definitely not have such an attitude. She did not intend to dig up Mulin's scars and ask her what had happened. She just hugged Mulin silently. Xiaoqing believed that she and time were enough to heal all scars. At the worst, she could find a good man for Mulin in the future, handsome and considerate, to warm her heart. The 2 of them chatted for a long time and talked about their recent situations. After that, Xiaoqing said to Mulin, Hope Survivor Base was built by an acquaintance of mine. If you want to settle down here, that's fine. Of course, I hope that you can come with me to Jiang City. But there are zombies there, and I'm afraid that you won't be used to it. I won't force you, so you can make your own choice. Even if you want to live in Hope Survivor Base, it's fine. Mulin did not hesitate. I will go with you. She held Xiaoqing's arm tightly and said, It was not easy to find you. I don't want to be separated from you. Aren't they just zombies? What are you afraid of? My current strength isn't weak either. Xiaoqing had already known that she was a psychic paranormal. Moreover, her psychic paranormal was very aggressive, which was completely different from Xiaotong's. Since you've said so, don't say that I didn't give you a choice when the time comes. Xiaoqing patted her head and said, What about Xiaoan? Break him off. Mulin waved his hand without any reluctance. There are gigolos everywhere, but you're the only one. Don't worry, I won't let your secret be leaked, but you have to compensate me with a handsome guy. Okay, what type do you want? What do you think of me? Xiaoqing held her face and said. Mulin immediately burst into laughter and rolled around in her arms. As she rolled around, Her tears flowed out. Why is this world so unfair? You've already suffered a lot, but those hardships and pain are still constantly added to your body. The heavens are so unfair. Fuck the heavens, they're not willing to give you any good things. I have both of you. Xiaoqing's eyes were gentle. She had lived a bumpy life and had been homeless for half of her life, but she did not have the slightest bit of resentment. Because when she lost, she gained enough. People should always be content. Contentment brings joy. If you only focused on the things you lost, then you would constantly regret and lose them. This was a principle she had known since she was very young. Ah Qing, does your son have a name? Mu Lin, who felt that this topic was too heavy, quickly changed the topic. She asked excitedly, "What's his name?" Xiaoqing was expressionless. After a while, she said, "He hasn't woken up yet." Mu Lin was speechless. "Let's not talk about how old your son looks first. He was born more than a year ago, right? He doesn't even have a name. How much do you dislike your son? Even if he is the son of a scumbag, it is not his fault." Mu Lin glared and said, "You can't vent your anger on the child because of that scumbag. The child is innocent." Ah Lin. You clearly know. Xiaoqing was still expressionless. Don't tell me you forgot. Mu Lin covered her forehead and said, "All right, I shouldn't have placed my hopes on a bad name. But have you ever thought that it's not a good thing that the child doesn't have a name? When your child grows up, you can't always call him Bao Bao or Bao Bao. When you meet someone to introduce him, you can't always call him Bao Bao, right?" Xiaoqing reflected deeply on her actions and said, "Then what should we do? Think of a name." Mu Lin was very excited. Bao Bao can be a pet name, but it has to have a proper name. Xiaoqing touched her chin and said, "Actually, I've thought about his proper name. Xiao Tuanchuan, which means round and round. Whether it's the meaning or the literal meaning, it's pretty good." Mu Lin, Chapter 566. As expected, she shouldn't have placed her hopes on a bad name. Mu Lin sniffed and said, "Can't you come up with a more normal name for the baby's psychological trauma?" Xiaoqing felt wronged. "Isn't this name good? How about Xiao Mingxi? Ming means the sun and moon, and Xi means the Xi of dawn. They both symbolize light and hope, and a beautiful future." Mu Lin held her chin and said, "A long time ago, I thought about it. When you have a baby and I have a baby, it'll be best if your baby is a boy and mine is a girl. That way, I can let my baby marry your baby and fulfill my wish of marrying you." Xiaoqing's mouth twitched slightly. Mu Lin's wish of marrying her came from when they were young. At that time, they were still in the orphanage. Mu Lin was especially thin and small and was often bullied by other children. Every time, Xiaoqing would step forward and protect her. Mu Lin had been very clingy to Xiaoqing since she was very young. At that time, the two of them were often hungry. Xiaoqing would secretly go to the kitchen to steal food or snatch other children's food. After she got food, she would split it into 2 portions and give the bigger portion to Mu Lin. She ate less. Mu Lin still remembered that one winter, the auntie in the orphanage treated them harshly. It was normal for them to not have enough to eat. The hungrier they were, the colder they were, and the colder they were, the hungrier they were. It became an endless cycle. The two of them hugged each other and covered themselves with a thin blanket. Mu Lin was so hungry that she cried. Xiaoqing had no choice but to go out to steal food and was caught. She was beaten black and blue by the auntie and was locked in the storeroom to reflect on her actions. The storeroom was damp and cold. In addition to the injuries on her body, Xiaoqing had a fever. Mu Lin secretly came to find her and cried by the window. She gave Mu Lin half a deep-fried dough cake, and Mu Lin cried even harder. Neither of them was willing to eat it. In the end, they leaned against the window and took a bite and passed it to each other. Neither of them was willing to take a bigger bite. The palm-sized deep-fried dough cake took them half an hour to eat. Xiao Qing's high fever almost took her life. It was Mu Lin who went to the dean. Seeing that Xiao Qing was dying, the dean was afraid that she would die in the orphanage and ruin the reputation of the orphanage. So, he found a doctor for her. After that incident, little Mu Lin told Xiao Qing that when he grew up, he would marry her and be her wife. Let's call him Xiao Qing. I don't want him to bear too many people's hopes. It's fine as long as he's happy. Xiao Qing chuckled. His nickname can also be Little Whistle. Mu Lin said helplessly, anyway, it's fine as long as he's not called Xiao Tuanchuan. Xiao Zi is Xiao Zi. At least he's lively. After deciding on Little Bun's name, the two chatted for a while. When it was time for dinner, Xiao Qing dragged Mu Lin to help her. After the two of them finished cooking, the men who had gone out for a walk came back. Although Xiao Qing was terrible at naming, she had always been very confident in herself. She couldn't help but show off. Baby, from today onwards, you have a name. It's Xiao Zi. Do you like it? Little Bun was dumbfounded. Then, he heard Mu Lin say coldly, the name she gave before was Xiao Tuanchuan. Little Bun immediately said, I like it. Xiao Zi was much better than Xiao Tuanchuan. In order to prevent his mommy from making him Xiao Tuanchuan on a whim, he had better accept the name Xiao Zi. Little Whistle, be good. Hurry and wash your hands. The food is ready. We can eat soon. Xiao Qing urged. Chapter 567. Yan Qiue then carried Little Bun to wash his hands. After washing his hands, Yan Hanqing went to the kitchen to help serve the dishes. As there were many people today, Xiao Qing cooked a lot of dishes. There were 8 dishes and a soup. Mu Lin calmly occupied Yan Qiue's previous seat. Yan Qiue had to carry her child to the seat opposite Xiao Qing. Her expression was that of an abandoned woman. During the meal, Xiao Qing had a simple chat with the man called Xiaoan. After all, he was brought here by Mu Lin, so she had to give him some face. However, as they chatted, she felt that something was wrong. This man called Xiaoan had been trying to flirt with her. At first, Xiao Qing thought that the flirtatious glance was for Mu Lin, who was sitting next to her. However, after looking left and right for a few times, she felt that something was wrong. According to the angle, the flirtatious glance was really for her. Xiao Qing was stunned at that time. She was really not Mr. Wang next door, and she had no interest in her best friend's man. The point was that Xiao An's flirtatious glance was very subtle. Other than Xiao Qing, the person involved, no one else seemed to have noticed it. She was flirted with inexplicably. Xiao Qing decided to be blind. Anyway, she just pretended not to see. After all, she had just reunited with Mu Lin. She did not want to create any trouble and affect her good mood today. Therefore, she could only swallow this fly into her stomach. She knew that it was a fly, but she still forced herself to swallow it. The feeling of swallowing a fly into her stomach was really bad. She could not even eat the delicious dishes. This situation continued until they finished their meal and were ready to go to bed. Only then did they feel relieved. As they were finally reunited today, Xiao Qing abandoned her 3 wives and 4 concubines and was ready to take an afternoon nap with Mu Lin. During the afternoon nap, she could not help but ask, that Xiaoan, are you really going to dump him? Mu Lin nodded and said, anyway, I definitely won't bring him to Rivertown. I don't have much trust in him. He's just an ordinary person, so I guess he can't stand it. At most, I'll give him some compensation. Let's just call it a day. I'll help him settle down in Hope Survivor Base, then I'll tell him. That's good too. In the end, Xiaoqing swallowed back what had happened. After all, it was not something to be proud of. Since the two of them were going to separate, it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. The next day, Xiaoqing went to work at the entrance again. She asked Tang Tianda to help Xiaoan settle down. Mu Lin went as well. No matter what, they had been together for a long time and had some feelings for each other. Mu Lin was also a person who valued relationships, so he wanted to make arrangements for him first. After a busy day, Xiaoqing prepared to buy some fresh fruits and vegetables and a few bottles of wine so that she could drink with Mu Lin in the evening. At night, both of them drank a lot. On the other hand, the men didn't drink much. Mu Lin was completely drunk. He hugged Xiaoqing and kept shouting that he wanted to marry her. He would kill anyone who tried to stop him. Then, he hung on Xiaoqing's body like a koala. She couldn't pull him off. He was very strong. Xiaoqing was very helpless. She could only say, "Let's sleep together tonight." Han Qing, please help Xiaoan settle down and find him an empty room. Mu Lin was busy the whole night. When she fell asleep, it was already midnight. Xiaoqing let out a sigh of relief. She was going to wash her face and then sleep. She was so happy today that she might not be able to fall asleep. When Xiaoqing reached the bathroom, the door opened. The man called Xiaoan walked out while drying his hair. Chapter 568. After settling Xiaoan down, Xiaoqing was ready to leave. She didn't even ask about Fu Jinling's fate, because she knew that Tang Tianda would treat her well. She didn't ask, but Tang Tianda would tell her. It was a good opportunity to take credit. It's hard for ordinary men to find wives nowadays. They don't even have enough to eat, so naturally, they can't afford to buy sex. I think that Fu Jinling is quite manly, so I gave her to those men. I guarantee that at least 50 men visit her every day. There's absolutely no time for her to be idle. Tang Tianda had an I'm such a good person expression on his face. Then, he said, in order to prevent her from hurting herself because she was too grateful, I broke her arms and legs, knocked out the teeth in her mouth, and chained her to the bed. I guarantee that she will thoroughly enjoy it. Mu Lin couldn't help but shudder. He raised his finger to praise Tang Tianda, amazing. Xiaoqing didn't have any fluctuations in her heart. She just reached out and touched Tang Tianda's head, encouraging him, very good. Okay, it's almost done here. Let's go back. There's still a piece of land in the east that hasn't been opened yet. Let's go back and work. Tang Tianda was speechless. Xiaoqing brought Mu Lin to Jiang City to let him familiarize himself with the place. This was Xiaoqing's base camp. No matter how turbulent the outside world was, it wouldn't affect this place. I've left a special scent on your body. All the zombies here won't attack you. You can go in and out freely. Xiaoqing brought Mu Lin around first, such as her plantation base, and then her secret base. In fact, it was just a small vegetable garden behind the house. There was nothing else in it. She paved a small vegetable field with a special red soil. The mutated plant that looked like a heart was planted on top of it. Some mutated plants with great destructive power were planted around it to prevent people from stealing her baby. After looking around the entire Jiang city, Xiaoqing said to Mu Lin, "It's safe here, but there's no one around. Other than me, there are only a few of my friends. It's inevitable that you'll be lonely. If you can't stand it, you can go to the Hope Survivor base or a nearby base. Come and see me when you miss me." Mu Lin snorted. Are you abandoning your old love now that you have a new one? Yes, you have 3 handsome guys with you. You don't need me anymore. You don't like me, so you want to chase me away. Xiaoqing looked helpless. How could there be such a thing? Okay, I won't say it anymore, okay? Let's go and see the room I prepared for you. Xiaoqing had prepared a room for her a long time ago when she had just arrived in Jiang City. She had always believed that she could find Mulin and knew that Mulin was willing to stay for her. Hence, she had prepared a room for Mulin long ago. The pink bed sheets, the pink curtains, and even the carpet on the floor were pink. It looked extremely cute. Mulin, who had a girlish heart since she was young, howled and threw herself on the bed. Then, she started to roll around. There was a pink bear on the bed. Ever since she was in the orphanage, she had a dream to have her own princess room filled with her favorite things. It would be clean and unsewn. There would be a furry blanket on the floor so that she could roll around without getting hurt or dirted. It would be best if there was a big wardrobe filled with clothes. They were all hers. She could wear whatever she wanted and throw away whatever she wore. Now, it had all come true. Mulin hugged the bear and rolled from one end of the bed to the other like a child. Chapter 569. Both of them were abandoned. She had a weak heart and her family was probably poor. Moreover, she was a girl and was unwilling to spend a lot of money on her treatment, so they abandoned her. Fortunately, her parents still had some conscience and left her at the entrance of the orphanage instead of on the streets or in the wilderness. Xiaoqing was even more pitiful. She was picked up by an old granny who was picking up scraps. When she was picked up, Xiaoqing was lying in the rubbish bin. In the winter, she was wrapped in a thin layer of swaddling clothes and her face was purple from the cold. The old granny liked children very much. Unfortunately, she could not afford to raise them, so she could only send them to the orphanage. A few years ago, the old granny would often visit Xiaoqing at the orphanage. When Xiaoqing was 4 years old, the old granny also passed away. In this world, there was no one else who would care about Xiaoqing. Only Xiaoqing and Mulin were left to depend on each other. They were not related by blood and were not relatives, but they were closer than relatives. Ah, Qing, your dream and my dream have both come true. It's so good. Mulin hugged the bear and panted on the ground. She turned over and pressed the bear under her body. Then she said, "Let's not go out. It's good to be self-sufficient in Jiangqing." Xiaoqing smiled and did not reply. She just patted her head. How could they not go out? It was not a good thing to be completely cut off from the world. It was just a joke. Even if they could, what about the children? Speaking of this, Xiaoqing was very worried. Since the end of the world, there had not been a single newborn. To be precise, there was not a single mother who was pregnant after the end of the world. If this was the real end of the world, then it was really too late for the entire human race. That was the real end of the world. After giving Mulin some space to familiarize herself with her room, Xiaoqing went out. She stood at the door and took a deep breath. She felt that the knot in her heart had been completely untied. The revenge had been taken. She had found her family and her lover by her side. It was almost complete. If her life was a book, it would have come to an end now. Sister Qing. Gu Panpan came back with Xiao Tong. Gu Panpan was very lively and happy today. Sister, you came back from the new survivor base. Xiaoqing patted Gu Panpan and asked, "Where did you go?" "I was bored at home, so I left my brother and asked him to look after the house. I took Tong Tong out to play." "Sister Qing, take a look at this." She stuffed something into Xiaoqing's hands as if she was presenting a treasure. Xiaoqing took a look and saw that it was a crystal core. It was at least level 6. She was stunned. Where did this come from? I killed him. Gu Ponpon's face was filled with pride. Xiao Tong nodded hesitantly. You're only at level 5 now. Where are you going to kill level 6 zombies? Xiaoqing knocked on Gu Ponpon's head and said, Tell me the truth. Where did you get them? I really killed him. Gu Panpan muttered softly, Today, we went out to play and ended up bumping into other people. We worked together to kill them, but I did the most. Tong Tong and I felt that you definitely needed a high-level crystal core right now, so we only took this one. We didn't take anything else. Xiaoqing was touched, but she still said, I'm already at level 7 now. A level 6 crystal core is not very useful for me. You can keep it. You're close to the peak of level 5 now, right? You'll need a level 6 crystal core soon to break through to level 6. Gu Panpan was a little dumbfounded. Sister, you're already at level 7. I just broke through not long ago. I forgot to tell you. Xiaoqing calculated. Her family had been at level 5 for a long time. They were not far from level 5. If they had a level 6 crystal core when they broke through, the possibility of breaking through would be greatly increased. It seemed that she had to find a way to get some level 6 crystal cores. At least she could let her friends have one each. That way, she could be at ease. Gu Panpan was a little disappointed. Xiaoqing had always been the one protecting them. Whenever there was something good, she would let them have it. She wanted to help Xiaoqing just this once. But no matter what, she couldn't even catch up with Xiaoqing's footsteps, let alone protect Xiaoqing. I'm very happy. Xiaoqing smiled gently. Her efforts were not wasted. Whether it was Gu Panpan or Xiao Tong, these people she cared about, they all gave her enough love and care. In this world, except for these people, no one else would take out a level 6 crystal core and give it to her. She doted on them like little sisters, and they still remembered her when they got something good. Even if this thing was very precious and many people couldn't get it. When they brought the things over, their eyes were full of concern for her. They sincerely hoped that she would accept it and that this crystal core would be useful to her. With these little friends, what more could she ask for? Anyway, she was already very satisfied. Go in and rest. Xiaoqing said softly, Get to know my friend while you're at it. I've brought a friend with me, and she'll be one of us in the future. Her name is Mu Lin, and she's my sister. The two of us came from the same orphanage. We're not biological sisters, but we're closer than real sisters. I hope you can get along well with her. Xiaoqing touched Gu Ponpon's head, and then touched Xiao Tong's head. Both of them nodded. One was more obedient than the other. Gu Panpan especially, patted her chest loudly. Sister Qing, don't worry. Your sister is my sister. I will definitely treat her well. Xiaoqing was amused. Then she said, I will go to the garden to get some fruits and vegetables. I will cook something delicious for you tonight. You can go in first. Don't bully Mulin. Don't worry, sister. Gu Panpan was very curious about what Xiaoqing's good sister looked like. She pulled Xiao Tong and walked in, as if there were small wind and fire wheels under her feet. Xiaoqing shook her head helplessly and smiled. Then she went to the vegetable garden. She planned to go out in a few days to catch some living mutated animals and rear them in captivity. After all, it was difficult to live with only vegetables and no meat. Those domestic animals were also domesticated step by step from the beginning. There was no reason that mutated animals could not be domesticated. When the time came, she would open a livestock farm. Then, everything would be complete. She really did not lack anything. Xiaoqing came back with a lot of vegetables and fruits. At the door, she found a lighter lying on the ground at the place where she chatted with Gu Panpan and Xiao Tong. It was the kind of ZP that was obviously male. Xiaoqing thought it belonged to one of the men in the family, so she picked it up and prepared to return it to them later. Chapter 570. During dinner, Xiaoqing forgot about the lighter. It was not until dinner was over and her husband began to clear the table that she remembered. She took out the lighter and asked, "Whose lighter is this?" "I picked it up at the door and came over to claim it." The men looked at each other and shook their heads, indicating that the lighter was not theirs. Gu Panpan, who was lying on the sofa after dinner, suddenly jumped up. She blushed and said, "It's mine." Xiaoqing did not think much of it. She threw the lighter to her and asked, "Where did you find it? Is there a similar style? It looks pretty good. If there is, I want to get a few for Hanqing and the others." Gu Panpan's cheeks blushed slightly. She said, "Someone gave it to me." "I don't know if there is a similar style." Xiaoqing was curious. Looking at the style, "It was given to you by a boy, right?" Gu Panpan stammered. Her cheeks became redder and redder. After a while, she stomped her feet and said, "Sister Qing, don't ask. It's so embarrassing. Little Panpan also knows how to be shy." Xiaoqing chuckled and said, "That's right, it's time to fall in love. If you really like her, then bring her back for me to take a look. I definitely won't be a bad person who breaks up a couple." "Sister Qing, you are so annoying." Gu Panpan covered her face and ran upstairs. Xiaoqing leaned lazily on the sofa and hugged an air dye. She sighed and said, "It's so good to be young. I feel that my mentality is so old already." She could not help but laugh. She said, "Mu Lin, when are you going to find one for me to take a look? Then I will be relieved." Mu Lin rolled his eyes. "Nowadays, 9 out of 10 men are perverted, and one of them is definitely not good enough. 7 out of 9 perverts are trash, and the rest either don't have the guts or don't have the ability. I'm not interested." Xiaoqing hugged her left and right, and then Yan Hanqing cut some fruits for her. Her life was very carefree. "Look at what you're saying. You have a mouth full of sharp teeth. There are always good men, such as the ones beside me. Don't be discouraged. You will still meet those who are destined to meet." Mu Lin came over and snatched a piece of orange, then said slowly, "Among the men I've met in my life, there aren't many good ones. It's not easy to find a few good ones, but they're either like the ones beside you, taken or dead in the apocalypse. Forget it, I'm destined to have no companions. It's good enough that I have you by my side." Xiaoqing sneered. "Your mentality is not much different from that of an old lady. I'll take you out for a walk some other day. If we don't need to go to one place, we can go to a few more places. We can always meet a few suitable ones. Take your time to choose. If we really can't find one, we can bring a few more back." Mu Lin lay on the sofa, stretched out her head and waited for the food. She could not hide the coldness in her voice. "What's the use of men? Only that thing can still be used. The only thing better than cucumbers is that you don't have to move yourself. It's easy." Xiaoqing did not try to persuade her again. She was determined to take her out for a walk. When she met a suitable person, she would not say that. The opportunity to go out came quickly. The planting base in Jiang City was very big. The vegetables and fruits were plentiful, and there were only a few living people in Jiang City. It was impossible to finish them all. Vegetables and fruits couldn't be stored for a long time. They would definitely go bad. Xiao Qing was thinking about selling the unfinished ones. Then she contacted Qin Zishi. If she sold them to the capital, they might be worried that Xiao Qing would put some corpse poison in the vegetables. If she sold them to Qin Zishi, there was no need to worry. Chapter 571. The Qin family had a lot of troops under their command, so they could consume a lot of fruits and vegetables. Tang Tiande had already contacted her in advance. Hope Survivor Base had just been established, and there were many things waiting to be done. Especially fresh fruits and vegetables, they were in short supply. The Tang family's father and son trusted Xiao Qing a lot. Of course, a large part of this trust was because these fruits and vegetables were all grown by Tang Tiande. Tang Yaozu didn't trust others, but he couldn't not trust his own son. Xiao Qing used a lot of fruits and vegetables to exchange for a lot of nuclei. She sold them at a very low price. It wasn't as simple as a friendship price, it was like a clearance sale. After all, she didn't want to sell them professionally. It was just that she was too excited at that time and planted a lot. Now that she couldn't finish them, she sold them. The price was about the same as a half buy, half free. The low-level nuclei were all hoarded by Xiao Qing and given to Yin Yi. The high-level nuclei were given to her friends out of kindness. She tried to get everyone to carry a bag of high-level nuclei. In case something happened, they would be able to back them up on the spot. There was a room in Xiao Qing's residence that looked like a warehouse. It was filled with crystallic nuclei, ranging from level 1 to level 5. Basically, whoever needed them would go directly to the room to get them. If the nuclei in the room weren't enough, then they would tell Xiao Qing, and Xiao Qing would go out to hunt. She had always been a person who treated her enemies coldly, but treated her own people well. This was also why so many people were willing to break away from the whole world for her. For example, Gu Pan Pan and the others were willing to leave the normal human society and live in a city full of zombies for her. There were too many fruits and vegetables, and they had to be transported to 2 survivor bases. Xiao Qing prepared to go out personally. Yan Hanqing took Gu Pan Pan, Gu Chuan, and Tang Tiande to Hope Survivor Base to send them off. Xiao Qing took Er Dai, Yan Chiue and Mu Lin to Jingdu. Xiao Tong was left to look after the house and the children. The 3 SUVs were filled to the brim. In order to prevent the food from spoiling too early, Gu Chuan had frozen all the vegetables and fruits that were not afraid of freezing. It was like a natural refrigerator. In a short period of time, the ice would not melt, and the food would not spoil. Once they reached the place, the food would be eaten quickly. Naturally, there was no need to worry about spoilage. After the motorcade left, Xiao Qing said to Mu Lin, "Look at more men when you're out. Even if you don't like any of them, there's no harm in looking at them more. If you do like any of them, just tell me. It's best if they submit to you, but it's also fine if they don't. We can directly bring them back." Xiao Qing was very domineering. Jiang City is very big. Even if you bring back a company, we can still afford to raise them. When the time comes, we'll let the obedient ones go. Anyway, there are zombies everywhere. They won't dare to run out of the city. If they don't listen to us, we'll tie them up and wait until they're obedient. The corner of Mu Lin's mouth twitched, and then he said, "My sister, can you stop thinking about finding me a man all day long? You might as well find me some suitable prop so that I can entertain myself." Xiao Qing immediately chose to ignore his thoughts, and then she began to change the topic. "Let me tell you, there's a donkey barbecue shop in Jingdu. The taste is very good, but the price is a bit expensive. After we send the food, I'll take you around Jingdu to look for delicious and fun things. How about it? Don't mention men. Everything can be discussed. You're making me hungry." Mu Lin touched his belly and then stretched out his fingers. "I want to eat 3. 30 is not a problem. Xiaoqing successfully changed the topic, and then she said to Mulin, there's a shop whose tofu pudding is also excellent. It's just that the owner of this shop has a very strong taste. He actually likes savory tofu pudding. It's simply heresy. Can savory tofu pudding be eaten? Can it be eaten? No. Only sweet tofu pudding is the truth. Mulin was speechless. She suddenly felt that after being separated for so long, she could no longer keep up with Xiaoqing's brain circuit. Who taught her to be such a weirdo? The Xiaoqing in the past was not so funny. Savory tofu pudding is as terrible as meat dumplings. Xiaoqing concluded, but that's not the point. The point is that the owner's tofu pudding is really delicious. Mulin was expressionless. She suddenly wanted to sit in another car. The Xiaoqing in the past was simply the current Guchuan. If you didn't take the initiative to ask her, she wouldn't even speak. After not seeing her for more than a year, she had become a chatterbox. The apocalypse was really scary. When it was noon, they stopped on time, set up camp, and prepared to eat. Regardless of whether Mulin was on a mission with others or traveling together, he had never eaten so punctually. In the apocalypse, there were dangers everywhere. Who would eat on time? Most of them walked until they reached a safe place. After confirming that there was no danger around, everyone was divided into two groups. One group was responsible for eating, while the other group was responsible for guarding and patrolling. When the first group finished eating, the patrolling group would come to eat. When they were eating, they were very nervous. They were afraid that zombies, mutated animals, and even mutated plants would jump out and kill them. Who would be like Xiaoqing and the others? Once they saw the time, they didn't care about where they were and immediately stopped to set up camp and prepare to eat. And there wasn't even a patrolling group. Some were responsible for collecting firewood, some were responsible for cooking, and some were responsible for sitting and waiting to eat. For example, Mulin. Since the apocalypse, it was the first time that she had experienced such a leisurely life in the wild. Xiaoqing was cutting vegetables beside her, and then said to her, compared to the base, it's actually more interesting outside. In the base, you can only eat the common vegetables, fruits, and dried meat. But in the wild, there are ingredients everywhere. All kinds of wild vegetables and animals. You can eat whatever you want. Do you feel like camping? Mulin was speechless. Sure enough, as long as one had the strength, one could live well anywhere. One didn't have to care about the environment. People like Xiaoqing could live like fish in water even in the apocalypse. But what he said was really asking for a beating. How could someone like her, who had lived a tight life for a whole year, endure this? Mulin was expressionless. She thought angrily, and then raised her hand, can we have barbecue for lunch? Like the one you barbecued last time. Put more cumin. If they wanted to be corrupt, they should be corrupt together. Chapter 572. Mulin hadn't been so happy for a long time. Her whole life after the apocalypse was oppressive and painful. In addition to struggling to survive and facing those conspiracies, she missed Xiaoqing. Only now did she feel relaxed. According to the map, there is a base in front. Let's rest here tonight. Xiaoqing looked at the map and said. Although it was safe for them to rest in the wild, the comfort of living in a tent was much worse than living in a normal room. Therefore, it was okay to waste some time to travel. They arrived at the base before it was completely dark. At this time, the sky was already slightly dark. The guards guarding the gate of the base were in groups of 3 to 5, sitting in a corner and playing cards. 2 guards were left to guard the gate, but there was no one outside. It was a happy thing that they didn't have to line up. There were no ordinary people in Xiaoqing's team, so they entered the base quickly. After a simple check, they entered the base. At this time, it was already very late. Even the people who were working in the base had already returned to their own residences. Xiaoqing led a few of her friends to walk around the base. She felt that something was wrong. This base was too quiet. Usually, there would be many people outside even at night. At least, there would be people walking around. In this base, they would occasionally meet a few people, who looked very numb and stiff. They were like level 1 zombies. If it weren't for their lively faces, people would really think that they were zombies. Xiaoqing and her friends went to the base hall and rented a room temporarily to rest for the night. When they left with the key, Xiaoqing felt that the base staff's cheeks were a little dark under the light. Deep doubts were engraved in her heart, but Xiaoqing didn't think much about it. They had been walking for a day, especially Mulin and Yan Qiue. They must be very tired. It was better for them to rest early. Before going to bed, Xiaoqing cooked a pot of porridge and gave everyone a bowl. Then, they went back to sleep. Around midnight, Xiaoqing suddenly heard some noises outside. After all, they were in someone else's base. Xiaoqing was more alert and didn't sleep well. Therefore, she woke up immediately when she heard the strange noise. After waking up, Xiaoqing listened carefully. It was very noisy outside, and the noise was getting louder and louder. Now, not only her, but everyone else woke up. What's going on? Mulin rubbed his eyes in confusion, and then said, "Why is it so noisy outside? Something might have happened. You put on your clothes first. I'll go out and take a look." Xiaoqing and Mulin were in the same room. Dai and Yan Qiue were sleeping in the next room. They heard the noise and walked out. Xiaoqing poked her head out of the window and was stunned. There were zombies outside, and they were all slow-moving level 1 zombies. They were densely packed. There were no ordinary people as far as the eye could see. It was as if everyone in the base had become zombies. However, when they entered the base last night, they saw many ordinary people. It was only one night. How did it suddenly become like this? Xiaoqing wasn't the only one who was stunned. Yan Qiue and the others who had put on their clothes and came over. Everyone was stunned. How did it suddenly become like this? Mulin was stunned. Xiaoqing calmed down instantly. You all stay in the room. Don't go out. I'll go out and take a look. Chapter 573. Be careful. Mulin knew that she was not afraid of zombies, so he quickly reminded her. Xiaoqing did not open the door, but went out through the window. After going out, she found that there were more zombies outside than in the room. These zombies looked like the first-level zombies that had just mutated at the beginning of the apocalypse. They were especially fragile, with stiff limbs and badly rotten bodies. But how could there be so many first-level zombies suddenly? First-level zombies were rare in the apocalypse, because most of the zombies had evolved for a year and were at least second-level or third-level. In other words, these zombies should have just mutated tonight. It was very likely that all the ordinary people in the base had become zombies. Then, where was the source? Xiaoqing walked through the zombie crowd. Even if all the ordinary people in the base had become zombies, there were still paranormals. Paranormals could not be infected. Where were the paranormals in the base? Soon, Xiaoqing found a living person. The man was hiding in the guard room at the entrance of the base. He was leaning against the window, trembling and looking out. Xiaoqing suddenly appeared in front of him, which scared him so much that he almost screamed. Fortunately, he knew that he should not attract zombies, so he covered his mouth tightly. His eyes were wide open because of fear. Open the door. Xiaoqing knocked on the window and said. The man was so scared that he kept shaking his head. He did not dare to open the door. What if the zombies also rushed in? What should he do? His superpower was very useless, and his level was very low. He only got the job of a guard by relying on his connections. He did not expect that such a thing would happen tonight when it was his turn to be on guard duty. He saw with his own eyes that his companion, who went out to the toilet, was surrounded by zombies and gnawed into bones. Now, he was completely scared out of his wits. It would be strange if he dared to open the door. Xiaoqing said faintly, either you open the door, or I break it. You choose. The man looked sad and finally opened the door. After all, if the door was opened, it could be closed. If the door was broken, the zombies would really be unhindered. He quickly opened the door and said, quickly, 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 come in. Xiaoqing walked in and he immediately closed the door. He leaned against the door and slowly slid down. His forehead was covered in sweat. What happened? Xiaoqing kicked him and said, get up and tell me why there are so many zombies in the base all of a sudden. I don't know. The man was about to cry. He stammered, I found that those zombies were familiar. They were all ordinary people in the base. But I don't know why they suddenly became like this. There were no signs before this. Xiaoqing frowned and said, it's impossible for everyone to become zombies overnight without any reason. What about the paranormals in the base? Previously, there were paranormals in the base who found a large greenhouse. There were vegetables and fruits in it. They grew very messy. It should be the seeds of the ripe fruits and vegetables that grew after Doomsday. There were many kinds of vegetables and fruits that we don't have in the base. Moreover, the greenhouse was in a town where there were many zombies. So, the base's leaders sent a mercenary group there, but they haven't returned yet. Speaking up to this point, his expression was particularly miserable. Who would have thought that such a thing would happen right after they left? We can rule out the possibility that zombies entered the base and infected everyone. After all, zombies can't silently infect everyone. Xiaoqing touched his chin and had a flash of inspiration. The zombie virus wasn't necessarily transmitted by zombies. There was another possibility, which was food and water. Although it would be much slower to infect people through food and water, it was still very easy. Then there was another problem. There were generally two kinds of water sources in the base. One was made by water paranormals, and the other was purified by the base's purifier. Those bottles and barrels of water were already very rare. Most of the drinking water in the base was made by the paranormals to water the ground. The water used in daily life was purified. Why would all the ordinary people suddenly be infected? Unless someone was crazy enough to poison them. Where's your base chief? Xiaoqing felt that this matter must be discussed with their base chief first to find out the reason. The man's face was dull. Sister, there are zombies outside. Are you going to find our base chief? I'm going to find your base chief, Xiaoqing said coldly, and you have to show me the way. The man was terrified. Tears and snot flowed down his face. I still have a young son, a wife, and an old mother to take care of. Big sister, warrior, please spare me. I really don't want to die. There are so many zombies outside. We'll die. Xiaoqing ignored him. She grabbed his collar and dragged him out. She kicked the door open. The sound of the door being kicked immediately attracted a lot of zombies to turn their heads towards this side. The man was so scared that he almost peed. He was over 1.8 meters tall, but he was crying and snot. He looked particularly terrified. Xiaoqing was expressionless. She just carried the man out silently. The man was very tall, so when Xiao Qing carried him outside, his legs were dragging on the ground. It looked a little funny. When some zombies smelled the man's flesh and blood and walked over, he immediately screamed in fear. Halfway through, his face changed. He didn't dare to scream anymore, because it would only attract more zombies. Xiao Qing raised her hand and slapped the surrounding zombies to death. She didn't even raise her eyes. At that time, the man was dumbfounded. His mouth was so wide open that an egg could be stuffed into it. Just a moment ago, he thought that the sky had already collapsed and that he was about to die with Xiao Qing. In the end, in the next second, he realized that Xiao Qing wasn't leading him to die. She was leading him to show off and fly. Xiao Qing walked all the way. The zombies passing by were slapped into meat patties by her. In the second half, she didn't even bother to do anything. She directly released the big flower and let it eat. She also had vines that were responsible for pulling away the approaching zombies. "Where is your base chief?" Xiao Qing asked lazily. The man felt that he had a backer. He hurriedly said, "Go straight, then turn left. Go straight ahead. The biggest house is very conspicuous." Chapter 574. The chief of the base was a fat man. When Xiao Qing arrived, he was going downstairs. Because the front door had been occupied by zombies, he went to the window and got stuck there. Half of his body was hanging in the air, which looked a little funny. Xiao Qing couldn't help but laugh. She stretched out her vines and pulled the fat man out of the window. The fat man was sweating. He couldn't help but take out a handkerchief to wipe his sweat, then said, "I'm sorry, I've never seen you before. Are you from outside?" Xiao Qing nodded, then asked, "What's the situation now? Do you know anything about it?" The chief shook his head, then said, "There was no warning. I was also shocked. The most important thing now is to summon all the superpowered people and control the situation." Speaking of this, the fat on his face couldn't help twitching. Obviously, he was distressed. Even if the situation was controlled and all the zombies were eliminated, the base could be considered as useless. Although ordinary people didn't have any abilities, they were an indispensable part of a base. Superpowered people were responsible for maintaining the safety of the base, or going out to look for supplies, and other work that required strength. Some of the daily and complicated work was done by ordinary people. This included planting, construction, and even many researchers were ordinary people. The number of ordinary people was far greater than the number of superpowered people. If all the ordinary people turned into zombies, even if the zombies were eliminated, no one would be able to do the daily work. Their base could be considered as useless. It would be too difficult to start anew. It was estimated that they could only merge with other bases. Xiao Qing nodded, then said, "First, summon all the superpowered people." Most of the superpowered people in the base had gone out, so when the outside was in chaos, all of them hid and didn't dare to go out. They quietly waited for the news. As soon as the fat chief shouted on the radio, they breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly gathered. The zombies outside were actually not high level. They could even be said to be pathetically low. If they encountered such a group of zombies in normal times, they wouldn't be afraid. However, this group of zombies were all people they were familiar with, and all of them had turned into zombies overnight. It was too strange, so they were panicking. The base chief sent out a group of people to clean up the zombies, while the others began to investigate the source of the zombies. When Xiao Qing was walking around, she realized that the zombies were evolving very quickly. It had only been half an hour since she woke up, and some zombies had already evolved to level 2. Although level 2 was still very low, if they could maintain this rate of evolution, it would be a little scary. When all the zombies were cleared and all the corpses were piled up in the square, the paranormals were in low spirits. All the corpses here were people they were familiar with. After the apocalypse, they had been together for a year, and it was easy for them to develop feelings for each other. Some of them were even their relatives and friends, but now, they had all become corpses. They didn't even find the source of their zombies. Overnight, these people turned into monsters for no reason. Xiaoqing was very calm. After all, she had nothing to do with these people. Immediately, Xiaoqing said, "I think the problem may be in the water or the food. Can you take out the water and food you have today to check?" The fat chief frowned, then said, "Whether it's the water or the food, we have been eating for so long. There shouldn't be any problem." Chapter 575. At the end of his sentence, he suddenly realized that the past 2 days were indeed different. Normally, they drank water made by superpowered people, but for the past 2 days, they drank purified water. Did the problem really lie in the water? At this time, Mu Lin and their Dai Yen Chiua also came over. Xiaoqing took them and asked the fat base chief to take out water and food. Yen Chiua stepped forward first and began to check. The others also paid close attention to it. After all, they wanted to find out the truth. This base was relatively small, and there weren't many researchers in it. Yen Chiua was the only one they could rely on. The more Yen Chiua studied, the angrier his face became. After a while, he said, "There's something wrong with the water and the vegetables." He showed everyone what he had found. It was a kind of black liquid. There was more of it in the water and less in the vegetables. At this moment, not only did his face turn ugly, the others' faces also turned ugly. Could it be that the water source was completely contaminated by the corpse poison? If that was the case, they could only drink water made by superpowered people in the future. The water made by superpowered people was always the purest, because they could separate the cleanest water molecules. They could even extract clean water from sewage. However, after the purified water became undrinkable, the superpowered people who relied only on water would be affected greatly. Fortunately, superpowered people didn't need to worry about being infected. It didn't matter what they drank. Immediately, someone was confused. "We used to drink the same water. Why didn't anything happen? But these 3 people came to our base, and now there's something wrong with our base." As soon as he said that, many people began to doubt Xiaoqing and the others. After all, he was right. They used to drink the purified water, and nothing happened. Why did it happen today? Xiaoqing glanced at them coldly, then said, "Idiots. I don't have any reason to attack your base, because even if all the ordinary people and superpowered people in your base work together, they can't cause any harm to me." When she said that, these people thought that she was being pretentious. Immediately, there were people below who laughed. They were probably laughing at her for overestimating herself. Even if she was pretentious, she should be more reliable. Xiaoqing wouldn't lower herself to the same level as these ignorant people. She just needed to use her strength to speak for herself. Then, Xiaoqing released the pressure of a high-level superpower possessor. A level 7 superpower possessor was like a legend to this group of people. Xiaoqing released her aura fiercely. Some of the weaker ones were not prepared and immediately knelt on the ground. Mu Lin giggled at the side. "Yo, grandson, now you know how to kneel before your grandmother." Their faces turned red from embarrassment, but none of them dared to say anything because their hearts were filled with shock. Although they couldn't sense what level Xiaoqing was exactly, she was definitely far above them. The big fat base chief's eyes were full of stars. He stammered, "Hi, hi, hi, hi. Master. You must be a level 6 arcanist." Xiaoqing didn't nod or shake her head. She just said, "Chiue, tell them what you found." Yen Chiue nodded and said, "The amount of zombie poison in the vegetables is very weak. Unless you eat them for more than 10 years, you won't turn into a zombie. The zombie poison in the water is enough to turn people into zombies in a short time. This kind of zombie poison can't be completely purified using purifiers. I don't know if it's because of your base or because it's happening everywhere. I don't know what you're going to do." Xiao Qing looked at the base chief. He hesitated for a moment and said, "When the superpower possessors who went out come back, we'll leave this base. Right now, we're preparing to find a large base to settle down in. If that's the case, you can tell the passing bases to check their own water sources and food. Don't let the other bases repeat the tragedy of this base." Xiao Qing looked at the sky. It was almost dawn. The wilderness was actually the most dangerous at this time. Of course, that was for other people. For Xiao Qing and the others, there was no difference between day and night. "We'll leave first." Xiao Qing said goodbye on the spot. The fat base chief was reluctant to part with them. In the end, he sent Xiao Qing and the others away. The atmosphere between Xiao Qing and the others was very gloomy. Xiao Qing said calmly, "In the next few days, we have to speed up and try to reach Jingdu as soon as possible. We have to tell the people in power in Jingdu about this. If the environment continues to deteriorate, it will be too dangerous. Especially those ordinary people. Even if they live in the base, they can easily turn into zombies." Although it was said that after a year of the apocalypse, many ordinary people had died. However, the number of ordinary people was still much more than the superpower possessors. If all the ordinary people died, then the entire population of the Celestial Empire would instantly drop by 90%. What a frightening ratio. According to this situation, the future world would really only have superpower possessors because of natural selection. This was not what Xiao Qing wanted to see. Maybe it's not as bad as we think. Maybe the water source of this base has been contaminated. Yen Chiue comforted her softly. Xiao Qing responded, but the worry in her heart grew stronger. She always felt that things were not so simple. At least, it was not as simple as it seemed on the surface. After all, as those people said, they had used the purified water source before, but there was no problem in the base. Why would there be a problem today? There were only two possibilities. Either someone really poisoned the water source, or the water source was contaminated recently. If it was the latter, it could really prove that the environment was slowly deteriorating. Xiao Qing looked at the sky. Her face was expressionless, but there was a faint sadness in her heart. It was probably nature's revenge for the destruction of nature by mankind. Therefore, when the apocalypse came, everything that mankind had done to nature was multiplied by nature. No wonder there was such a saying. Karma, good and evil, retribution. It was not that there was no retribution, but that the time had not yet come. Mankind had finally tasted the bitter fruit that they had planted. Chapter 576. They arrived at the capital city as fast as they could. After arriving, Xiao Qing didn't go in directly. She was worried about causing panic. After all, many people in the capital city knew that she was an inhuman. It would be bad if she scared them. Mu Lin went into the city first and contacted Qin Zishi. Qin Zishi came to pick them up in person. When they arrived at the gate, Xiao Qing saw Master Qin standing at the gate. He stood on his tiptoes and looked around. When he found that there were only 4 of them, he was very disappointed. The baby didn't come. It was a dangerous journey, so I left him at home. I didn't dare to bring him here. Xiao Qing's heart was warm. Old Master Qin didn't act strangely because of her and Little Bun's status. He still liked Little Bun as usual. This was the greatest kindness he had shown them. Take him with you next time. I miss him very much. Master Chin felt wronged. We haven't seen each other for a long time. The baby must miss Grandpa. Okay, I'll take him with me next time. Xiao Qing smiled and said, I have something important to tell you this time. When they talked about business, Master Qin became serious. He asked Xiao Qing and the others to come in first and asked someone to put the vegetables there. Did something happen? After they sat down, Qin Zishi poured tea for everyone. Master Qin patted the sofa and asked Qin Zishi to sit down as well. Xiao Qing told Master Qin what they had encountered on their way here and what they might have guessed. If it's only one base, then it's contaminated. If all the bases have the same problem, then it's the environment. Master Qin's face changed. Old Master Qin's face changed, then he said, most of the bases drink water made by superpowered people, but a base is too big, so there are always some people who drink the purified water. But it's really not eye-catching for one or two people to become zombies, especially now. It's too chaotic. Many bases have heard that high-level zombies have sneaked in. The news you brought is very important, so it can't be spread out for the time being, otherwise it will cause panic. Xiao Qing, take your people and stay here for 2 days. I'll send people out to investigate and see if something similar has happened. Okay, old master. Xiao Qing took out a pack of shredded tobacco from her space and handed it to old Master Qin. Then she said, I planted it myself and it's already dried. The tobacco leaves are much stronger than cigarettes. Old Master Qin, have a taste. Old Master Qin immediately beamed with joy. Before the apocalypse, he had an opium pipe. The tobacco he smoked was of high quality. It was produced in the Northeast and was especially strong. After the apocalypse, not to mention the Northeast shredded tobacco, it was already good enough to have cigarettes to smoke. He patted Xiao Qing's shoulder and said, You're much more filial than my son. Qin Zishi rolled her eyes. If my father is a bastard, then what are you? Little brat, go away. Old Master Qin glared at Qin Zishi and sighed. Xiao Qing, you were born at the wrong time. If you were a little older and my son wasn't married, would have match-made the two of you. If you were younger, you could have married my grandson. He sighed. I've always wanted a daughter. Why don't you be my daughter? Xiao Qing smiled and said, No, I can't. My situation is not suitable. She was actually very grateful. She could see that Master Qin really liked them and treated them as family. The more he treated them like this, the more she couldn't drag him down. Chapter 577. Her identity was too sensitive. Once it was discovered, the entire Qin family would be implicated. After all, humans believed that those who were not of their kind must have a different heart. She was indeed a zombie. She could live away from the crowd, but the Qin family couldn't. Once outsiders found out about her relationship with the Qin family, they would definitely use this to attack them. Old Master Qin said very seriously, Girl, what's wrong with your situation? Just because you're a zombie. Who wants to be a zombie? Just because you can't choose to be a zombie, you must be a bad person. You have your own thoughts, your own consciousness, and you can distinguish between good and evil. You're better than most ordinary people. What's wrong with you? If you don't like me, just say it. I'm about to die anyway. It's normal for people to dislike me. You know that's not what I meant, Xiao Qing said helplessly. She didn't want to bring trouble to the Qin family. Old Master Qin sighed and patted Xiao Qing's head. Silly girl, it's my privilege to have a daughter like you, do you know that? Actually, I should have a daughter too, but it was a mess at that time. My youngest daughter died with her mother before she was born. If she could be born, she would be about the same age as you. Xiaoqing smiled helplessly. You're playing the emotional card. I'll accept you as my godfather. Please don't dislike me in the future. I definitely won't dislike you. I even got a grandson for free. Old Master Qin couldn't stop smiling. Qin Zishi was dumbfounded. After a while, she said, I got an ant out of nowhere. Good nephew, ant will treat you to candy. Xiaoqing really took out a fruit candy and stuffed it into his mouth. Qin Zishi looked helpless. Old Master Qin made the ceremony very formal. After paying respects to heaven, earth, people, king, parents, and teachers, they offered incense and tea. Only then did they really become godfathers. Old Master Qin was smiling happily the entire time. He held Xiaoqing's hand and was full of joy. He couldn't wait to tell everyone he met that this was his daughter. Let's catch up with my bastard son and daughter-in-law tonight. Let's have a good meal as a family. Old Master Qin patted Xiaoqing's hand and said happily. Xiaoqing took this opportunity to calmly introduce the people around her to Old Master Qin. At that time, Old Master Qin was dumbfounded. He had just gained a goddaughter and 2 godsons-in-law. Moreover, according to his goddaughter, there was another godson-in-law who hadn't come yet. After a long while, the old man finally said, My daughter is capable. To be able to make so many men willingly follow her, wasn't that also a kind of ability? Moreover, these men were all very outstanding. None of them were bad. She didn't suffer a loss at all. The old man got over it in a matter of minutes. What era was this? It was the end of the world. It was already so chaotic. Why would he still consider how many men she had? What did it have to do with him that she was leading a good life and that there was no fire in her backyard? Most importantly, this was his daughter. His daughter was outstanding and capable. It was natural for her to find a few men. It was fine as long as his daughter was happy. Old Master Qin had just gotten a daughter. Now that he looked at Xiaoqing, no matter how he looked at her, everything she did was right and everything she did was good. Xiaoqing couldn't help but sweat. It was a miracle that Qin Zishi wasn't spoiled rotten. Old Master Qin was spoiling her to the heavens. After the official business and private matters were settled, Xiaoqing prepared to fulfill her promise and take Mu Lin out for a walk. Old Master Qin was very reluctant. After all, this was his daughter who he had just acknowledged. It was the most passionate time for their relationship. However, he couldn't stop his daughter from taking her friends out to play. Hence, Old Master Qin instructed Qin Zishi seriously, take your aunt out to play. Don't let anyone bully your aunt. If anything happens, don't hesitate. Just beat them up. I'll hold the sky up even if it collapses. Qin Zishi, QAQ biased. He had been beaten up since he was young. Now that he was with Xiaoqing, he was spoiled to the heavens. How biased was she? In other families, daughters were treasures and sons were weeds. In this family, daughters were treasures and sons and grandsons were weeds. However, Qin Zishi didn't feel that it was unfair at all. He liked Xiaoqing very much too. He was very happy that he could become a legitimate family with Xiaoqing. If Xiaoqing became his sister instead of his aunt, it would be even better. Did anything big happen in the capital these days? Xiaoqing asked casually as they walked out. Qin Zishi thought for a moment and said, nothing big happened. It's still the same as before. If you want to talk about big things, it's probably that 2 big factories have just been built. One is dedicated to producing some daily necessities, and the other is a military factory. However, the capital's territory isn't good. In terms of food production, it's a lot worse. It's even a bit of a problem for self-sufficiency. A while ago, they opened a planting base not far from the capital. It's still an experimental field now. If it succeeds, the capital can truly become self-sufficient. Since the end of the world, human beings have been slowly getting on the right track. When the environment doesn't adapt to us, we can only adapt to the environment. Human beings have a strong ability to adapt to the environment. As long as there are no more changes, things will stabilize soon. Xiaoqing said so, but the worry in her heart didn't lessen at all. Because the changes had already happened, and they couldn't find the source. If it was man-made, it would be fine. If it was man-made, it would be easier to solve. However, if the environment was really changing, then human beings would have to adapt to it again. Now that the water source was infected, would the air be infected, the land would be infected, and even the light would be harmful to human beings. If it went on like this, sooner or later, human beings would be extinct. The only people left on this planet would probably be zombies and a small number of people with superpowers. In the end, there would be no food, no water source to survive, and no companions. The superpowered people who could survive would choose to end their own lives. Thinking about it this way, zombies would be the ones who evolved according to the environment, and superpowered people would be the ones who would be eliminated. Taking a deep breath, Xiaoqing threw these horrible thoughts to the back of her mind. She said seriously, when I was in the capital, I had already eaten all over the capital. I remember clearly which restaurant made the best food and which snacks were the most special. Today, I'll take you to eat all over the capital. After a while, she didn't know if there would be such peace like today. Chapter 578. There were many craftsmen in Jingdu who had fled from the disaster and settled down in Jingdu. Many things that couldn't be seen in the outside world after the apocalypse could still be found here. For example, some snacks. Although there were fewer shops than before the apocalypse, it was more than enough to satisfy them. In the end, they came back with their hands on the wall. They were so full that their stomachs were protruding. Xiaoqing was better. She just found something she liked to eat, so she added some special ingredients and ate a little. After eating, she walked around and led Mulin. After walking around, they went back. As the few of them were walking back, a man suddenly walked towards them. His facial features could be considered decent, but he had a frivolous look on his face. After he came over, he pointed at Xiaoqing and asked, "Are you from Jingdu? Why haven't I seen you before?" Qin Zishi stood out first. "Why are you everywhere? Get out of the way. We're going back." When the man saw Qin Zishi, he knew he couldn't get what he wanted. His expression was dull, but he still joked. "Qin Zishi, you're finally enlightened. You don't want to be an old virgin anymore. You have good taste. If you don't want it one day, just call me." Qin Zishi said in disgust, "Can't you be more virtuous? She's my god aunt." God aunt. Hello, god aunt. He deliberately emphasized the pronunciation of the first word, and his expression was as wretched as it could get. Qin Zishi was so angry that his face turned pale. He wanted to put a sack on him and beat him up. Xiaoqing asked, "Who's this guy? Why haven't I seen him before?" "He's from a senior in the base. There was a mess during the apocalypse, and he couldn't find his son. The senior thought his son was dead. He didn't expect this guy to be so lucky and find his son himself." Qin Zishi sneered and said, "Before the apocalypse, he was a playboy. After the apocalypse, he lost his temper. But a dog can't change its habit. He came back after a few days." "Who are you talking about?" The man's eyes widened. He and Qin Zishi had always been at odds because his family always used Qin Zishi to educate him. This was the case before and after the apocalypse. To him, Qin Zishi was someone else's child. At first, he just wanted to strike up a conversation with Xiao Qing because she was pretty. Although he was a playboy, he had never forced anyone to do anything to him before the apocalypse. Even after the apocalypse, he had never forced anyone to do anything to him. It could only be said that although he was a dandy, he did not have a bad conscience. It was only when she saw Qin Zishi that she could not help but mock her a little. Xiao Qing had also noticed this point. Otherwise, she would have sent him on a day trip to the underworld. He wouldn't have had the chance to run his mouth here. However, having a bad mouth was also a disease that needed to be treated. Xiao Qing rolled up her sleeves and suddenly made a move without saying a word. She directly kicked him to the corner and gave him a good beating. Mu Lin and the others immediately followed, especially Yan Qiue. He was the most vengeful person. When he beat someone, he would deliberately step on some key parts. And he was very ruthless. It was not his own balls, so he stepped on them casually. Xiao Qing felt pain for him. The man was beaten until he screamed. At first, he choked and said, "Qin Zishi. You've got guts. How dare you beat me? Aren't you afraid that my grandpa will find trouble with you? I'll go back and tell my grandpa." Later, he began to beg for mercy. "Brother, sister, don't hit me. Ouch. You stepped on my balls. It's going to break. You can't hit me. You can't hit my face either. Give me a way out." Chapter 579. Xiao Qing was satisfied with the beating and rubbed her fists. She looked down and saw that the man was huddled in the corner, trembling like a pitiful boy who had been gang raped. She sneered and said, "I'll teach you a lesson. Next time, when you tease someone, you should look carefully. What kind of temper do you have? Do you have the advantage in numbers? If it were someone with a bad temper, they would have cut off your thing long ago." He didn't dare to talk nonsense anymore. He curled up in the corner, looking as pitiful as he could be. Xiao Qing kicked him twice, but he didn't dare to make a sound. He held it in as tears streamed down his face. Xiao Qing couldn't be bothered to lower herself to his level, so she left with her men. The scene was really like a group of hooligans gang raping a virgin girl and then leaving her in a mess, crying in the corner. When they returned, old Master Qin was already calling for people to cook. He kept asking Xiao Qing, "What do you like to eat? Is there anything you don't eat? Don't be shy. After all, it's your home." Xiao Qing really treated this place as her home. She named 2 dishes and said, "You know my situation. I definitely can't eat much." Old Master Qin's heart ached. He pulled Xiao Qing and said, "I know you two have suffered a lot. In the future, don't be afraid of anything. Even if the sky falls, I'll hold it up. Although I don't have many years left to live, my bones are still strong. Even if the sky falls, I won't break." "What are you talking about? Your body is in good condition. You'll definitely live a long life." Xiao Qing frowned and calculated. If a superpowered person's body was in good condition, their lifespan would definitely be extended. Old Master Qin was now in his 60s. At most, he could be considered middle-aged. She thought of some ways to increase Old Master Qin's strength. Of course, she had to side with her own people. Old Master Qin kept pulling Xiao Qing to the sofa to talk. Xiao Qing told Old Master Qin about the man she met today. After all, he sounded like he had a good family background. Although she wasn't afraid, it was still troublesome. She should let Old Master Qin be mentally prepared. Old Master Qin was so angry that he jumped up and shouted, "Don't stop me. I'm going to break that brat's legs. How dare he tease my daughter?" Moreover, it took several people working together to hold him back. Old Master Qin had a bad temper. Although he was persuaded, he would definitely hold a grudge. In the future, that brat would definitely suffer. Xiao Qing helplessly smiled bitterly, but her heart was very warm. Since she was a child, she had never felt the feeling of her family standing up for her. When she was bullied and got into fights at school, or when she attended parent-teacher conferences, she always hoped that her parents would stand up for her. More than 20 years had passed, and this thought had long faded. She no longer had the persistence and desire of the past, but she had everything. These family members were very precious to her. Xiao Qing lowered her eyes. Now that she had power and influence, no one could hurt her family. At dinner time, Mr. and Mrs. Qin came back. No one knew whether they were satisfied with old Master Qin's decision or not, but at least their attitude towards Xiao Qing was good. Mrs. Qin put food in Xiao Qing's bowl and said, "Eat more." "Xiao Qing, are you going to stay here this time? It's good that you don't have to run around. It's not safe outside. Anyway, it's comfortable to stay at home. After dinner, I'll prepare a room for you." Old Master Qin was very satisfied with Mrs. Qin's reaction. He nodded slightly and said, "Stay here. Don't worry, no one will dare to say anything." Xiao Qing shook her head and said, "My friend built a base in the south. I'm living in that base now. The land there is very spacious, and I built a vegetable farm there. Next, I'm preparing to build a farm, so I can't leave. Our family can't support you and your mother. You're so tired all the time. Come home. Come home and stay." Old Master Qin had a fierce face. When he made a loving expression, it was a little stiff, but it was full of sincerity. Xiao Qing shook her head. "Godfather, no one knows what will happen in the future. I have to store some things so that I can rest assured. It's also a retreat route. If you manage it well, you'll have a place to stay in the future." Old Master Qin's heart ached, but he didn't emphasize it. He only said, "When you have time, bring the baby back to see me." Then, he began to sigh. "I'm old. It's time for me to retire. I just want to see my grandson more." "Okay." Xiao Qing silently put food in Old Master Qin's bowl. In the past, she probably built the farm on a whim. Now, she was prepared to manage it well. Even if she didn't think for herself, she had to think for the Qin family. After the apocalypse, what they lacked most was fresh vegetables and fruits. They could never have enough of these things. After going back, she also planned to open a grain farm and fruit farm. Anyway, she had a little brother at home who specialized in this area. It would be a waste if she didn't use him. Tang Tiande, Qaq Father Qin and Xiao Qing didn't have much affection. In fact, he was against this matter. After all, Xiao Qing's identity was too dangerous. If something happened in the future, Xiao Qing would become a reason for others to attack their family. However, when he looked at old Master Qin's white hair, he couldn't say no. He was stubborn and had been in a cold war with Qin Zishi for many years. He really didn't let old Master Qin enjoy the joy of a family reunion. Old Master Qin was already at this age. It wasn't easy for him to find a suitable goddaughter. He really couldn't bear to ruin it. Father Qin was very helpless. After a long while, he thought, as long as old Master Qin was happy, what was there to be afraid of even if something really happened? Their Qin family had never been afraid of anything. While they were enjoying themselves here, chaos broke out outside. It was noisy. Among the messy footsteps, there was a vigorous voice. "That old bastard surnamed Qin, you've grown up. You know how to bully my grandson. How can you bully the young so smoothly? Get out of my way. If you stop me again, I'll shoot you." The guards couldn't stop them. In the end, a group of people arrived in front of Xiaoqing. The person in the lead looked about the same age as old Master Qin. Behind him, there was another person who looked very familiar to Xiaoqing. Oh, wasn't this the one who made her cry today? She must have called her parents. The old man walked over fiercely. He pointed at old Master Qin and scolded, "Our two families didn't interfere with each other's business. We've been safe and sound for so many years. Qin, what do you mean by this? How dare your grandson beat my grandson up like this? How shameless!" Chapter 580. Old Master Qin was infuriated. How dare the guilty party complain first? He slammed the table and stood up, not to be outdone. He roared, "If your grandson didn't flirt with my daughter, would my grandson hit your grandson? I'll say it now. I've gone easy on him. If you want me to hit him, I won't be able to break his legs." The old man said sarcastically, "Do you think your daughter is a goddess? Anyone who sees her would want to take liberties with her. You old fart, what kind of daughter can you give birth to?" Old Master Qin's eyes widened. He pulled Xiaoqing over and patted his chest proudly. "My daughter is prettier than a goddess. That grandson of yours is really a grandson." The old man wanted to mock old Master Qin, but when he saw Xiaoqing, he was stunned. When old Master Qin saw this, he couldn't help but laugh. "I already said that my daughter is prettier than Tianxian. Are you stunned? Let me tell you, this enmity is set. You came at the right time today. I was just about to find your grandson to settle the score, and you brought your grandson to my door. You saved me the trouble. Today, both of you don't have to leave. Let's settle the score properly." As he spoke, he felt that something was wrong. 2 drops of turbid tears fell from the corners of the old man's eyes. He and the old man had fought for most of their lives. Even when the old man's sons died on the battlefield one after another, he had never seen the old man cry. But now he was crying. His tears flowed down uncontrollably. His fingers trembled as he reached out, wanting to touch Xiaoqing's face. Xiaoqing subconsciously took a step back. She was alert. Only then did the old man wake up. Then, he looked at Xiaoqing with a disappointed and kind gaze. "Little girl, I'm sorry. Did I scare you?" Xiaoqing shook her head. She felt that this old man was very strange. It was better to stay away from him. The old man seemed to have forgotten that he was here to denounce Xiaoqing. He kept looking at Xiaoqing with a very special gaze. Then he praised, "Old Qin, how much virtue did you accumulate in your previous life to give birth to such a beautiful daughter?" "I did it." Old Master Qin snorted. "Even if she's not my biological daughter, she still follows me." She wasn't his biological daughter. After tricking him into telling him what he wanted to know, the old man narrowed his eyes and asked like an old fox, "Then where did you pick up such a good daughter?" "I also want to pick one up." "Daughter, what's your name? How old are you this year? When is your birthday?" Before he could finish, old Master Qin shielded Xiaoqing warily and said, "Even if he's an old cow eating young grass, he still needs some face. You old thing, move your eyes away. Don't even think about my daughter." The old man's face darkened. Just as he was about to defend himself, he heard old Master Qin say, "Your grandson teased my daughter. Grandpa, do you want to try? Your whole family is shameless." Only then did the old man remember what he was here for. He immediately brought his grandson over. The young man walked over obediently. "Grandpa, do you believe me or him?" Then, the old man picked him up and gave him a beating. The belt and the boot were all used. The young man was beaten until he cried out in pain. It was obvious that the old man was really ruthless. he didn't intend to show any mercy at all. As he beat him, he muttered, "You've grown up and dare to tease anyone. How did you raise such a grandson?" "Oh, Grandpa, don't hit my face. And don't hit my butt. Oh my God, I don't dare. I really don't dare." The young man cried out, but he was tightly held and couldn't run away. He pulled a long face and tears came out. Wasn't this called the evils brought on by oneself the hardest to bear? Chapter 581. In fact, he really didn't think of telling his parents at that time. After all, although he was immoral, he wasn't that bad. However, as soon as he got home, he met his grandfather. At that time, he was in a mess and looked very pitiful. In the end, his grandfather caught him. The old man asked him what happened. He didn't dare to say that he was beaten for flirting with a good woman, so he stammered and put the blame on Qin Zishi. Who would have thought that his grandfather would come directly, and he would be beaten up again? How pitiful! After beating his grandson and expressing the excitement in his heart, the old man asked the question again. Xiaoqing said calmly, "I'm from S City. I'm 27 years old this year. I don't have parents. I was picked up from the garbage bin by an old lady who was picking up scraps. So I don't know my birthday, and I've never celebrated it." For a person who had a hard time even living, birthdays were really dispensable. She would only celebrate Mulin's birthday once a year. She would treat it as celebrating her own birthday as well. The old man held back his tears and said, "Child, now I suspect that you're my child. Because you look exactly like my wife, except for your eyes. And your eyes are like mine. You're joking." Xiaoqing smiled and said softly, "Today was really a farce. I don't want to pursue what happened before. That's it. Godfather, I'm going to rest." Old Master Qin glared at the old man who was about to snatch his daughter and snorted. "You said she's yours, so she's yours. You want to snatch something good when you see it, even my daughter. Don't even think about it." The old man looked at Xiaoqing helplessly. In fact, he couldn't be sure, but Xiaoqing was too similar to his wife, and she was an orphan. He couldn't help but think of his lost daughter. His wife had given birth to 6 children for him, 5 boys and 1 girl. 4 of them had died in the war, one of them was the father of the young man beside him, and the last one, who was also the youngest girl, had been lost. His wife cried day and night because of this. She fell ill and passed away just like that. Before she left, she even held his hand and told him that no matter what, he had to find his daughter. The old man couldn't help but recall the first time he held his daughter. Her soft and small body was very delicate. He didn't dare to use any strength. His body was frozen in that position, afraid that he would accidentally hurt the delicate baby in his arms. His hands, which had held guns all his life, could not hold a small baby. His hands, which could be very steady when killing people, were trembling as if he had Parkinson's disease. He was so happy that he wanted to tell the whole world that he had a daughter. At that time, he even discussed with his wife what name they wanted their daughter to be named. He flipped through the dictionary and listed all the beautiful words: wisdom, beauty, softness, and immortality. His wife had said that she didn't want her daughter to be too intelligent, because wisdom was bound to hurt. She didn't want her daughter to be too beautiful, because beautiful women would have short lives. She didn't want her daughter to be too gentle, because with their tolerance, it was fine as long as his daughter was happy. In the end, they named their daughter Tan Xiao, and her nickname was Ping Yuan. They hoped that their daughter would be happy every day, that her smile would never disappear from the corners of her mouth, and that she would be safe and happy for the rest of her life. But he didn't expect that. It wasn't Ping, but Ping. Ping as in duckweed. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, he wouldn't give up. When the old man left, he bent his back, which had never collapsed in his entire life, like the most ordinary old man. He bent his back, looking as though he had aged many years. Slowly, slowly, he left the Qin family. When he left, Xiao Qing was actually standing by the window on the second floor, watching silently until the grandfather and granddaughter left the Qin family. Yan Qiue walked over and whispered, "Do you believe it?" Xiao Qing didn't say anything. After a while, she muttered, "The wind is blowing. It's a little cold." She had yearned for her family, but that was 20 years ago. She was leaning against the window, staring at a cream cake while drooling silently. A little girl in a flowery dress was sitting in the shop, eating pudding, and then innocently asking her mother, "Is she a beggar?" Back then, she would fantasize that her mother would come looking for her, holding her in her arms with heartache, and calling her name. But later, day after day passed. In order to survive, she was covered in cuts and bruises. Bit by bit, she saw this world full of evil clearly. She no longer had such beautiful fantasies. More than 20 years later, she had already lost what she should have lost and possessed what she should have. But someone stood up and said that she could very well be her child. At this moment, Xiao Qing's heart didn't fluctuate much. She just leaned against the window, wearing Yan Qiue's clothes and quietly reminiscing about the past. Mu Lin stood to the side, feeling very conflicted. She didn't know how to persuade Xiao Qing. She didn't have much expectations for this late kinship, but she didn't know what Xiao Qing was thinking. After a long, long time, Xiao Qing asked her, "Do you still remember when we were adopted?" "Yes." Mu Lin covered her mouth, holding back the urge to cry. Xiao Qing had been very beautiful since she was young. Even though long-term malnutrition made her look a little thin and weak, she was still the most beautiful among the group of children. Many people tried to adopt Xiao Qing. Every time, Xiao Qing would insist, "Can I take Mu Lin with me?" Mu Lin was the same. The two of them were like two little hedgehogs, spreading their hard thorns to the world and leaving their soft abdomens to each other. Mu Lin had actually been adopted once because the aunt told her that if she followed her, there would be a lot of delicious food. She didn't want Xiao Qing to be beaten black and blue just to steal some food. She didn't want Xiao Qing to drool over those snacks. She followed the aunt because she wanted to get a lot of food. That way, the two of them wouldn't have to worry about winter anymore. When Xiao Qing sent her off, her gaze was very gentle. She whispered, "Ah Qing, wait for me to bring back delicious food." Xiao Qing smiled and didn't say anything. She knew that Mu Lin would go to another city, which was very far away. About 2 weeks later, Mu Lin came back. She was dirty and looked very disheveled. She stood at the entrance of the orphanage and was scolded for a long time by the aunt of the orphanage because she sneaked back. But Mu Lin was very happy. She held a bunch of candies and said to Xiao Qing, "I won't leave alone. Look, I brought you something." At that time, Xiao Qing thought that Mu Lin didn't rely on her. They relied on each other. Chapter 582. The relationship between Mu Lin and Xiao Qing was probably no longer as simple friends, best friends, or sisters. It could not be described with words. They were closer than family. Moreover, Xiao Qing now had old Master Qin and the rest. As family, she no longer needed any other relatives. So what if those people had the same blood as her flowing in their bodies? In the past 20 years, when she needed family the most, Mu Lin was the only one by her side. Only now did they appear and tell her that they were her family. There was no need for that at all. The Tan family had a big business. If they really wanted to find her, how could they not find her? Xiao Qing curled her lips somewhat mockingly. Then, she led her friends back to her room to rest. Lin bit the corner of her lips and said, "If it's true." Xiao Qing decisively cut her off and said, "Let's not talk about this, okay? I'm so sleepy. I want to sleep." Lin shut her mouth and looked at her worriedly. She knew Xiao Qing's character very well. Even if she rejected her, she would feel upset for a long time. As they walked upstairs, Lin finally couldn't hold it in. "Didn't you say that your biggest wish was to see your mother? Now that you have the chance, why don't you fight for it?" She said softly, "I know you probably have resentment in your heart. If I were you, I would have done the same. But no matter what, he's still your family. Don't you want to know the so-called truth?" Xiao Qing didn't say anything, but she felt a little bitter. Since she had already chosen to abandon him back then, why did she have to put on such a farce today? "Go back to sleep." Xiao Qing didn't say anything else and just returned to her room. The next day, she woke up very early. However, someone had already come to look for her. This person was none other than the old man from the Tan family. He was a little nervous and looked around anxiously until he saw Xiao Qing. He relaxed a little and then said softly, "Did I disturb your rest?" After a night of thinking, Xiao Qing was much calmer when she faced the old man again. She faintly said, "No, may I ask what is the matter? If not, I'll take my leave." The old man said with some difficulty, "I found a strand of hair that belonged to you on Xiao Er's body. Then, I did a test. You are my daughter." Xiao Er was the man who had been beaten up by Xiao Qing. Probably when she was beating him up, her hair fell on his body. That long hair did not belong to him at first glance. "If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." Xiao Qing was very calm. She had already guessed it. Even the old man could recognize her by her appearance, so he would not be mistaken. The old man's face was a little embarrassed, but he still asked, "Why did you go out? Do you need my help?" Xiao Qing had accumulated a lot of negative emotions in her heart. As long as she looked at the old man and heard him speak, she would be reminded of a long time ago. She was picked up from the trash can and sent to the orphanage. How could they not find her? As long as they had the heart, with the Tan family's power, how could they not find her? She didn't want to question them, but she also didn't want to face this problem. She had family and didn't need other family members. Probably because her attitude was too cold, the fat old man felt her rejection. He could only smile bitterly and then said, "You hate us in your heart, right?" He could imagine that a child who grew up in an orphanage would have a hard life. It was normal for her to hate them. Chapter 583. He wasn't discouraged because of this. He only said slowly, "Are you willing to listen to me tell you a story?" Xiao Qing's foot, which had already stepped out, instantly froze. Although he said that he didn't care, he still cared. When she was young, she had also questioned why she was abandoned in her dreams. There were many abandoned children in the orphanage. They were all physically or mentally challenged. There were also some who were born with diseases, so they were abandoned by their families. What about her? Whether it was her body or her IQ, she didn't seem to be sick. Then why was she abandoned? Why did someone only find her after so many years? And it was because of an accident. She once really wanted to know. Now, although she said that she didn't care about it, she still cared. She stopped in her tracks. The old man sighed and said, "You were secretly taken away by someone. The person who took you away was the original nanny. Back then, because of some problems, the nanny hated the Tan family very much, so she secretly took you away. We have searched many places, but we couldn't find you." The old man said helplessly, "I wanted to see you more than anyone else. I know that you might not be able to accept it immediately. I'm not in a hurry." Take your time to think about it. The old man knew very well that there wouldn't be a good outcome if he pushed too hard. Xiaoqing believed most of it, but not all of it. She was very calm, but her fingertips were trembling slightly. She finally knew why she was abandoned. No one had abandoned her. Everything was just a conspiracy. She just happened to be the victim. She didn't want to pursue the details because everything was in the past. She was living very well now. No matter what happened back then, no matter what the reason was, you didn't find me because this only means that we weren't fated to be father and daughter. It's all in the past. Let it be. I'm now Xiaoqing, the daughter of the Qin family. Xiaoqing clenched her fists and said calmly and politely. It would be a lie to say that she didn't have any resentment in her heart. She wasn't a saint, but after knowing everything, the so-called resentment had long disappeared. What followed was tiredness. The old man was very vague, hiding many details. She did not want to pursue those details, but she did not want to return to this home. Even if this family was very powerful and wealthy, it was not her family. Her home was in Jiang City. Now, there was another Qin family. However, there was one place that had nothing to do with her, and that was the Tan family. I know it's too late to say anything now. Child, I won't force you to do anything. I just beg you, can you go back and look at your mother's memorial tablet and tell her? After all, when she passed away, her eyes were wide open, looking into the distance. Tell me. Old man, you have to find your daughter. She's still so young, she must have suffered a lot outside. When she breathed her last, her eyes were still wide open, looking into the distance with tears in the corners of her eyes. Go back and take a look, and let your mother rest in peace. Xiaoqing answered with difficulty. Okay. When she was young, she had imagined countless times what her mother would be like. She would be gentle, smile at her, and tell her stories when she was sleeping. With her limited imagination, she couldn't think of anything else. She could only imagine that her mother would be warm. She could hate anyone, but she could not hate her mother. Okay. The old man said a few words. Then, he asked carefully, how about we go over now? Xiaoqing nodded. Then, she brought Dai, Yan Qiue, and Mu Lin with her. It was obvious that the old man was very happy. He talked along the way, talking about Xiaoqing's mother when she was young. The Tan family was not far from the Qin family. When the old man brought them back, the man was already waiting at the door. It was Tan Xiao. From his name, it could be seen that the entire Tan family had not forgotten Xiaoqing, Tan Xiao, and Tan Xiao. Tan Xiao's expression was very complicated. He would never have thought that after he flirted with a girl, that girl would become his aunt the next day. Biological. His dog eyes must have been blind. It was still very early and there were very few people at home. The old man brought Xiaoqing all the way to the place where his ex-wife's memorial tablet was placed. The room was empty, but it could be seen that it was often cleaned. The memorial tablet was placed in the middle of the room. In front of it were some simple offerings. There was not even a black and white photo. Xiaoqing had no way of knowing if she really looked like her mother. She only stood in front of the memorial tablet and stared at the row of words, Tan Zheng's wife, Madame Zheng. This was her mother's memorial tablet. The woman who gave birth to her. Xiaoqing felt her eyes sting for some reason, but she could not cry because she did not have tears. She only looked at it quietly. After a long time, she asked the old man, "Do they really look alike?" The old man said firmly, "Yes, very alike. They are exactly the same." She knelt down and lit a stick of incense. The two men, including Mu Lin, also kowtowed a few times. Xiaoqing did not say anything. She knelt for a long time. When she finally stood up, she was fine. However, Yan Qiue's legs were a little weak. The old man stood behind and watched her back. His eyes were filled with tears. He had not cried many times in his life. The last time he cried was for his wife. All on. Did you see? Our daughter is back. She is as beautiful as you. She came back to see you. The old man kept nagging. The tears in his eyes did not stop. It did not matter that his daughter did not want to admit it. At least she was back. At least he knew that his daughter was safe and sound. Old woman, you should be able to rest in peace in the underworld. The old man laughed. He wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes and made up his mind. He owed Xiaoqing more than 20 years. Now that he had found Xiaoqing, he would not let anyone have the chance to hurt Xiaoqing. Not even the Heavenly King. He only hoped that before he died, Xiaoqing would acknowledge him. Then, even if he died, he would be able to rest in peace. When he was in the underworld, he could look for his wife and tell her that his daughter was calling for him. After slowly calming down, the old man realized that something was wrong. For example, the two men beside Xiaoqing. His expression changed. He could not help but feel wronged. Could it be that his daughter had been kidnapped? Chapter 584. After kowtowing and offering incense, Xiaoqing prepared to leave. She felt much more relaxed now that her only obsession in her life had been resolved. Old Master Tan was left behind as he watched Xiaoqing leave with her people with a dumbfounded expression. His mind was filled with the thought, oh fuck, my daughter has been kidnapped. After Xiaoqing left, he called Tan Xiao over. That afternoon, when Xiaoqing was eating, Tan Xiao leaned against the door frame of the Qin family's house and shouted shamelessly, I'm here to look for my aunt, my biological aunt, don't stop me. Aunt, your nephew is about to be torn apart by 5 horses. Xiaoqing calmly picked up food for her 3 children and let him shout as loud as he wanted. Old Master Qin snorted coldly at the side. This little brat from the Tan family doesn't have much ability, but he's thick-skinned. Even if you don't want to care about him, he can still shamelessly cling to the door until night time. Don't care about him. Qin Zishi couldn't help but roll her eyes. This brat was going all out and shameless. They continued eating and didn't want to care about Tan Xiao anymore. Tan Xiao fully demonstrated how shameless he was. Xiaoqing and the rest heard that there was no sound outside and thought that this brat had finally stopped. Unexpectedly, after 2 minutes, Tan Xiao's voice suddenly came from outside. It was like a ghost wailing and wolves howling. His voice was especially loud. Those who didn't know would think that someone was doing something to him. Xiaoqing couldn't eat anymore. She bit her chopsticks and had a headache. They had no choice but to go out and see what was going on. When they went out to take a look, Tan Xiao was sitting on the ground and rolling around. He didn't look like a playboy at all. Instead, he looked like a scoundrel. Tan Xiao sat on the ground and rolled around while crying, Aunt, you can't abandon me. I'll die. Aunt, pity me. Aunt, my biological aunt. Xiaoqing was speechless. As soon as Tan Xiao saw Xiaoqing come out, she quickly rushed over and hugged Xiaoqing's thigh. Then she continued to cry, Auntie, Auntie, I know you're not willing to give me up. You're a good person. The passers-by who were watching the show could not help but cast their gazes over. Xiaoqing covered her forehead with a helpless expression. Then, she mercilessly stretched out her leg and kicked Tan Xiao out. Scram! Stay away from me. Don't make me repeat myself. Feeling wronged, Tan Xiao hugged himself into a ball and rolled himself to the corner. He looked at Xiaoqing helplessly. He looked so pitiful that the people around were talking about it. Xiaoqing closed the door with a bang. Before the door was closed, Tan Xiao rushed over and stood in the gap of the door fearlessly. As long as he pinched, he could break Xiaoqing's neck. Xiaoqing was expressionless. "What do you want?" "Grandpa asked me to follow you." Speaking of which, Tan Xiao felt even more wronged. His grandpa was so fierce that he shouted that he would break his legs if he could not complete the task. He also said that no matter what, he should stay by Xiaoqing's side and find a way to arouse Xiaoqing's desire for family affection. But in the current situation, it seemed that he could only arouse Xiaoqing's desire to break his legs. "No, you can go." Xiaoqing stretched out her leg to push Tan Xiao's forehead and pushed him out. Tan Xiao tried to hold on to the door and refused to retreat. "No, Auntie. If I go back like this, Grandpa will definitely break my legs." "What does that have to do with me?" Xiaoqing was expressionless and continued to kick him out. After the molestation incident, if it were not because she did not want to cause trouble for the Qin family, she would have broken Tan Xiao's legs. He even pretended to be pitiful in front of her. He deserved to have his legs broken. Tan Xiao put himself in the gap of the door with difficulty. No matter how Xiaoqing kicked and pushed him, he did not move. He even negotiated with Xiaoqing. "Auntie, let me stay. I can do laundry and mop the floor. If you ask me to go east, I will not go west. If you ask me to beat a dog, I will not beat a chicken." Chapter 585. "I'm telling you to get out of my sight." Xiaoqing gestured for her friends to help, so a few of them rushed forward and dragged Tan Xiao out. Tan Xiao was still being dragged on the ground. He was especially unwilling. "Auntie, I know I'm wrong. Seeing that I'm so handsome, please save me this time." Then the door was closed. Tan Xiao, who was lying on the ground, was speechless. Xiaoqing really didn't want to talk to him. She thought that Tan Xiao would behave himself after being humiliated, but to her surprise, Tan Xiao didn't leave her house after that day. He sat at the door. Whenever someone opened the door, he would find a way to get in. When no one opened the door, he would sit at the door and knock from time to time. He made himself look very pitiful. The guards who had gone out to investigate had all returned. They brought back a lot of news, but none of it was good news. The same thing happened in many bases. The difference was that most of the bases mainly drank the water made by superpowered people. Only a few of them drank purified water. Only those bases that didn't have many water superpowered people would drink purified water. Therefore, in most of the bases, there were only a few ordinary people who turned into zombies, so people didn't raise their vigilance. There were only a few bases that were almost wiped out because of drinking purified water. However, it fully proved that Xiaoqing's guess was right. The problem did appear in the water source, and it wasn't as simple as a base. Could it be that the entire environment had been completely polluted? If that was the case, it would be the end of human beings. There had been cases in the capital, but the number was small, so it didn't attract much attention. After Xiaoqing's guess was confirmed, Master Qin had a headache. He hurriedly contacted all the higher-ups in the capital and went to a meeting. Master Qin was going to take Xiaoqing with him, but Xiaoqing refused. Her identity was too sensitive. If she really attended the meeting, it wouldn't be a good thing. Master Qin knew that Xiaoqing was worried, so he didn't say much and went to the meeting. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Tan Xiao squatting at the door. Tan Xiao had been squatting there for a long time. When he saw someone open the door, he wanted to hug his thigh, but when he found that it was Master Qin, he hurriedly turned around and fell on his face. Old Master Qin snorted coldly, stepped on his palm, and walked over. Tan Xiao, who was in so much pain that tears came out of his eyes. The meeting was about to begin, and Xiao Qing was also preparing to leave. She had already done her best by informing the capital city. She actually wanted to participate in the upcoming meeting, but considering the views of some people, she might as well walk around and find a boyfriend for her Mulin, or find herself a mutated plant to fill in the last vacancy. She was at level 7 and she could subdue another plant. For Xiao Qing, what she needed now was probably a support-type plant, preferably a healing-type plant. She didn't need it herself, but her friends did. She already had enough plants for attacking and so on. Now, she only lacked a healing plant for her little friends to use. Hence, she wasn't in a hurry. She could take her friends and walk around while looking for one. Whether she could find it or not depended on fate. This wasn't something that could be forced. She was going to talk to old Master Qin about leaving after the meeting. Chapter 586. When Xiao Qing left with her friends, old Master Qin sent them all the way out of the city, looking at her back. Xiao Qing was a little embarrassed to leave. She had never been cared about so much, except for the few in her family. She couldn't help but feel warm. When they left, it was close to noon, so they didn't walk far before they stopped to prepare lunch. In order to show that he was useful, Tan Xiao first went to pick up some firewood, then came back to clean the ingredients and help with the fire. After lunch, he even washed the dishes. Xiao Qing suddenly felt that it was okay to take him with them. At least, they could save the money of hiring a nanny. He didn't eat much, but he did a lot of work. He was like an all-around nanny. When she was in a bad mood, she could use him as a punching bag. They walked leisurely, neither slow nor fast. Soon, they entered the southern area. After Doomsday, the temperature changed a lot. Originally, the southern area was a little bit humid, but the climate was good. However, after Doomsday, the southern area became hot. It was almost as hot as Africa. Many of the mutated animals and plants that could walk had moved to the north to live. There were fewer survivor bases in the southern area than in the northern area. Let's rest here today, okay? If we go any further, we might reach a place with more zombies. Xiao Qing looked into the distance and found that there should be a town in front of them. The town was quite prosperous before Doomsday, because it happened to be close to a cement road, so the traffic was relatively smooth. So, the number of zombies in the town should be quite high. Although Xiao Qing and the others were not afraid of zombies, they were afraid of trouble. If they could, it would be better to go around. They were now in the small forest next to the cement road. This time, Xiao Qing made boiled fish and braised pork. The others were sitting aside and drooling. Although Tan Xiao had not been with her for long, he had seen her cooking skills. Now, he was completely kneeling under Xiao Qing's apron. Just as the meal was ready, before they started eating, they heard a burst of noisy footsteps. A group of people was running towards them, followed by a lot of zombies. Xiao Qing had just scooped up the soup, and before she could decide whether to do anything, the young man at the front shouted, "Run! There are zombies behind us." He actually didn't think of using them to block the zombies. He was a pretty good person. Xiao Qing reluctantly put down her chopsticks and then released her little vine. Among the group of zombies, only one was at level 5. The rest were at level 3 or 4. They were easy to deal with. Xiao Qing cleaned them up in less than a minute. Those who were being chased were still in a daze. They had risked their lives to escape and had even lost a few of their companions. In the end, Xiao Qing had waved her hand and solved their problems. This was the real gap between them. Xiao Qing actually had 3 reasons for saving people. First, she had already seen them, and it was easy for her to do so. If she did not save them, it would be too much. Second, this young man was willing to speak out and remind her. He seemed to be a good person. If it were someone else, they might have used them to block the zombies. The most important point was that the young man at the front was very good-looking. Xiaoqing was currently looking for a boyfriend for Mulin, but she still did not want to let go of any good-looking guy. This was a world that really depended on looks. The young man was the first to come over, and then he thanked them. "Thank you so much. If it weren't for you, I don't know how many of us would have survived." Chapter 587. Xiaoqing was very easygoing. "You're welcome. What's your name? How old are you? Do you have a girlfriend?" As soon as Mulin heard this, he knew that Xiaoqing was asking on his behalf, because it was absolutely impossible for Xiaoqing to hit on a stranger in front of the two men and her family. Mulin couldn't help but take another look at the young man. The young man seemed to be in his early 20s. He was very young and handsome. Most importantly, he had a gentle temperament. Thank you very much. If it weren't for you, we would have become zombies' lunch." The young man whispered, "My name is Mulianchuan. I'm 21 years old. I don't have a girlfriend." When he talked about girlfriends, he couldn't help but blush. Then he whispered, "I'm just an ordinary person. I don't have any superpowers. No girl likes me." He looked so pitiful that even Xiaoqing couldn't help but reach out and touch his head. He was a very cute boy. Xiaoqing looked at Mulin, indicating that she should chat with him if she was interested. It was quite difficult to meet someone she liked these days. Xiaoqing hoped that Mulin could find a partner to accompany her in the future. Although Mulin wasn't interested, he couldn't help but comfort him when he saw the young man's pitiful appearance. "You're good-looking. There will always be girls who like you." Was that really comforting? Xiaoqing couldn't help but rub her head. Then she deliberately said, "It's fate that we met. Do you want to stay for a meal?" The others were tired after running for a long time. When they heard that there was food, they immediately gathered around and looked at Xiaoqing eagerly. Xiaoqing pointed to the front calmly and said, "There's a town in front. There must be something to eat. You can find it yourselves." Then she turned her head and pulled Mulianchuan. The difference in treatment was too obvious. The others didn't have a good relationship with Mulianchuan. Their faces turned ugly when they heard this, but they didn't say anything. After all, they had seen Xiaoqing's strength. They didn't dare to cause trouble, so they left Mulianchuan and left together. Mulianchuan was very embarrassed, and then he said, "I should also go. You saved me, so I should repay you. How can I have the nerve to eat your food?" As he spoke, he blushed a little. "I can't repay you for saving my life now. If there's a chance, I will repay you." Xiaoqing intended for him to spend more time with Mulin, so naturally, she wouldn't let him leave just like that. Xiaoqing hurriedly pulled him back and said, "It's just a meal. It's not worth much, so why refuse? Since it's fate that brought us together, let's sit down and have a meal together. I still have some things to ask you, unless you're afraid that we'll ask you to repay our kindness and are in a hurry to leave." Xiaoqing was moving him with emotion and reasoning. She even used the legendary goading method. Mulianchuan's face was red all the time. He hurriedly said, "I'm really not in a hurry to leave, then sit down and have a meal together," Xiaoqing said lightly. When Mulianchuan heard this, he said helplessly, "All right then, I'm sorry to trouble you." During the meal, Mulin's seat was arranged by Xiaoqing to be next to Mulianchuan. Mulin whispered to Xiaoqing, "I really don't mean that, and I don't want to find a boyfriend. I'm not forcing you to get married. I'm just letting you interact with him. If you don't like him, then forget it." Why do you have to look like a white-haired girl? Xiao Qing rubbed her head and said, It's just a meal together, not letting you sleep. Have a good chat. If you don't like him, then part on good terms. What's the big deal? Only then did Mu Lin go back and sit down obediently. The reason why she was against dating was because of her dead boyfriend. However, people should look forward and not stay in the shadows of the past. In the past, Mu Lin kept a gigolo to relieve her boredom because she was lonely. Now that she had found Xiao Qing, she would not be lonely anymore. Naturally, she did not want to have a boyfriend anymore. However, Xiao Qing hoped that she could find someone she loved. They were relatives and good sisters, but she could not replace her lover's identity. Therefore, Xiao Qing wanted to untie Mu Lin's knot in her heart and find her a good man. If she liked someone, it did not matter if there were a few more. Again, it was not like she could not afford to raise them. With the current financial and material resources of Jiang City, she could raise a few men. Even a company or a regiment of men could be raised. She was not afraid of Mu Lin's love, but she was afraid that she was not willing to find one. During the meal, Mu Lianchuan was a little reserved. He only touched the dish in front of him. Xiao Qing did not care and kept observing him secretly. Mu Lin was a soft-hearted person, at least compared to her. Seeing the young man like this, she could not help but pick up some food for him. Don't be too restrained. Eat whatever you want. Those who don't know will think that you only like to eat plain rice. Mu Lianchuan bit his lower lip and said thank you softly. Mu Lin liked this kind of boy the most. Probably because of her early experience, she was especially competitive in this aspect. She liked boys who were passive but not cowardly. She could pamper them. It was okay for her to raise them. It was even good for her to raise them. This way, she would feel very safe. Seeing Mu Lianchuan's cute appearance, Mu Lin was actually a little moved. It would be good if she could find a boyfriend like Mu Lianchuan. When she was free, she would tease him. When she was busy, he would definitely help her silently. He would be shy and blush. They could kiss each other during the day and have sex at night. How good was that? However, Mu Lin liked it when both parties were willing. If Mu Lianchuan was not interested in her, she would definitely not force him to go back. A forcibly picked melon would not be sweet. With chopsticks in her mouth, Mu Lin looked at Mu Lianchuan. Perhaps she could try it out and see what he was interested in. If he was not interested in this aspect, it was okay. She could just change to another one. Thinking about it, she was really envious of Xiao Qing's interactions with her men. There were men who pampered Xiao Qing and were also pampered by Xiao Qing. It was enviable. Mu Lin was not prepared to express her thoughts directly. It would be okay if Mu Lianchuan agreed. What if he did not? Xiao Qing would definitely snatch him away. Mu Lin, who had made up her mind, picked up some food for Mu Lianchuan and said, "Eat more. I see that you are so thin. You look like you will be blown away by the wind. How can you be so thin?" Mu Lianchuan smiled shyly. Then, he picked up some food with his chopsticks and put it in Mu Lin's bowl. He whispered, "I can't get fat no matter how much I eat. Especially after the apocalypse, I have been running around. So, I lost some weight. But I have muscles." He even showed off his pitiful muscles. Mu Lin could not help but laugh. Xiao Qing looked at this happy scene and suddenly felt a little out of place. Chapter 588. That strange feeling came out of nowhere, but it made Xiao Qing feel uneasy. The key point was that she didn't know where this feeling came from. Xiao Qing looked at Mu Lianchuan carefully and felt that her uneasiness was too strange. Mu Lianchuan was very normal. He was just an ordinary person. Except for his handsome face, there was nothing special about him. Thinking of this, she suddenly had an inspiration. She looked at Mu Lianchuan carefully from bottom to top. Xiao Qing had always believed in her premonitions. Her sixth sense was very accurate. It had saved her many times and had never made a mistake. Therefore, Xiao Qing felt that there must be something wrong with Mu Lianchuan. Just when Mu Lin was considering whether to have a deeper conversation with Mu Lianchuan to understand him better, Xiao Qing suddenly touched Mu Lianchuan's cheek with her fingertips. Mu Lin was stunned for a moment, then calmly crossed Mu Lianchuan off the list of people to understand him better. Men were like clothes, and Xiao Qing was like a brother. She wouldn't quarrel with a brother over a piece of clothing. Then, things developed beyond her imagination. After Xiao Qing touched Mu Lianchuan's face, she suddenly pulled out a military knife and stabbed it into Mu Lianchuan's chest. Mu Lianchuan also jumped back quickly. He reacted quickly and jumped out of Xiao Qing's attack range. He didn't look like an ordinary person at all. Tan Xiao was stunned and murmured, "A woman's heart is like a needle at the bottom of the sea." There was still a military knife in Mu Lianchuan's chest, but there wasn't a trace of blood. He was still very calm. "How did you find out?" Xiao Qing said coldly, "Your disguise is too good." "I didn't find anything wrong at first, but no matter how good your disguise is, it can't change the fact that you're not a living person. The difference between the skin of a living person and that of a zombie is huge. Color, temperature, flexibility, and other aspects. I've seen too many zombies, so I naturally found something wrong. Then I tested it. Sure enough, your skin is cold and stiff. You don't look like a living person at all. I can't help but admire your observation skills." Mu Lianchuan sighed, gave her a thumbs up, and said, "You're the woman with the sharpest senses I've ever seen. Thank you for the compliment." Xiao Qing pulled out another spare military knife and prepared for battle. Then she said, "Who sent you? What's your purpose? Tell me." Mu Lianchuan smiled. His whole body suddenly flew towards Xiao Qing like an arrow piercing through the air. The surface of his body was covered with a layer of green mist. This green mist was a type of deadly poison, and also one of his trump cards. He didn't dare to say that he was always successful, but at the very least, the number of people who weren't afraid of his poison could be counted on one hand. Mu Lianchuan smiled coldly. Just as he was about to pounce on Xiao Qing, he was entangled by a bunch of vines. He was not afraid because all the vines would be melted by his venom. He was full of confidence, but the next second, he was stunned. All the vines ignored his poisonous mist and tightly trapped him in the middle. Some of the vines even used his poison as nourishment and absorbed part of the poison. What a joke! Xiao Qing had fed her vines with poison. It could be said that her vines were a type of deadly poison. How could something with deadly poison be poisoned? Wasn't this a joke? So Mu Lianchuan was dumbfounded. Originally, he could have escaped, but because he was too confident, he was tightly bound by the vines and hung in the air. Xiao Qing lazily stretched out her hand and touched his cold cheek. Then she said, "This is the feeling." Chapter 589. Mu Lin also went up to touch it. It was cold, but not too stiff. It was like a snake's skin, which made one's hair stand on end. She exclaimed, "Ah Qing, you're really amazing. How could you tell?" She thought that Mu Lianchuan was really a normal man from the outside. If she didn't try, she wouldn't find out that he was abnormal. Xiao Qing said, "Look at your skin and then look at his skin. You'll find the difference." She was like this, so it was natural for her to find out that there was something wrong with Mu Lianchuan. Mu Lianchuan struggled for a while, and the thorns on the vines pierced deeper. Xiaoqing smiled and said, "Don't try to struggle. You can't escape." Mu Lianchuan was hung in the air. He sighed helplessly and said, "This time, I've lost. I'm convinced. You're even more powerful than the rumors say. Thank you for the compliment." Xiaoqing was expressionless. She pinched his chin and said, "This time, can you tell me who sent you?" Mu Lianchuan blinked and said, "I wanted to come here. Would you believe me?" Xiaoqing didn't say anything, but the distrust in her eyes was obvious. Mu Lianchuan said helplessly, "In this day and age, the truth is the hardest to believe. No one really sent me here. I only heard some stories about you, so I specially came to take a look. Put me down. We are the same kind, so let's not kill each other." "Who's the same kind as you?" "Bah." Mu Lin spat and said without caring about his image, "Don't try to claim connections." Xiaoqing comforted Mu Lin, then added more vines and tied Mu Lianchuan up tightly. "Okay, I'll believe you this time. Now, you can tell me where you came from." Mu Lianchuan was hung there like a salted fish. He said honestly, "I really can't tell you this. Otherwise, you won't be able to see me again." He changed his shy image and said shamelessly, "Since we're the same kind, please let me go this time. At most, I'll let you sleep with me in any position." Yan Qiue was furious. "Bah. In your dreams." Because of his dishonesty, Xiaoqing tightened her vines. She didn't expect him to spit it all out. The food he ate couldn't be digested at all. Because he wasn't human, he didn't have the ability to digest food. So when he was stimulated, he spat it all out. Fortunately, Yan Qiue reacted quickly and jumped away. Otherwise, she would definitely vomit all over him. Mu Lianchuan coughed and cleared his throat before he said, "I'm not joking. I'm serious. I'll sleep with you for a while. Let me go. You can choose any position you like. Man on top and woman on bottom, woman on top and man on bottom." Xiaoqing decisively stuffed his mouth with a vine. In order to prevent him from biting off the vine, Xiaoqing let the vine entangle his tongue. The sharp thorns instantly penetrated the skin with a kind of anesthetic poison. This time, Mu Lianchuan was really speechless. He looked at Xiaoqing with a resentful face. His eyes were full of complaints, and it was as if he was saying, "You really don't know how to be romantic." Then, a vine pulled open his clothes and exposed his flat and pale chest. When they saw his face, they didn't feel anything strange. However, when his chest was exposed, they also noticed it. Mu Lianchuan's chest was especially white. It was the kind of paleness that looked like it had been soaked in formalin. At first glance, people would think that he was too white. But when they looked closely, they would realize that he was so white that he didn't look like a living person. His tongue was locked, but he still didn't behave. A sickly red color appeared on his cheeks as he said vaguely, "If you want to see my chest, just say it. You're so beautiful, I'll definitely take it off myself." Xiaoqing ignored him. The vine had already touched his chest. Below his chest, where his heart was, it was calm. There was no beating at all. After confirming his identity, Xiaoqing tied him up into a bowl. Then, several people took turns to look at him. Although Tan Xiao was a little stupid, he wasn't stupid. He had just heard too much, and now his brain was a little blank. He seemed to know something that he shouldn't know. Would he be killed? He was honest. He lowered his head and swallowed all the doubts in his heart back into his stomach. Xiaoqing calmly tied Mu Lianchuan into a ball and threw him into the car with a pile of messy things. If it weren't for the many doubts that hadn't been solved, she would have directly killed Mu Lianchuan. After eating, they went on the road again. Mu Lin had been very curious. Is his situation the same as yours? Are there a lot of zombies like him? Logically speaking, there shouldn't be. I don't know what his situation is. We can only let Yan Chiua study it carefully when we take a break. Xiao Qing said softly, I always feel that he hid the most important part. His origin is not simple. Mu Lin nodded and then took the opportunity to say, Qing, look, it's not easy to meet a good man. In the end, he's not a living person. Does this mean that I'm not destined to be with a man? You don't have to find one for me. Xiao Qing gently touched the back of her head and said, there are always good men. Don't be discouraged. Who hasn't met a few scumbags? Mu Lin was directly discouraged. She bit her handkerchief and sobbed. Why did Xiao Qing have to try so hard to find a partner for her? Not a few perverts. She really didn't want it. The group of people packed up and then continued to move forward. After turning a corner and going around the town in front, they continued to walk. Until the sky gradually turned dark, they still didn't see any place to stay. Not to mention a survivor base, there wasn't even a place to shelter from the wind and rain. They could only directly set up camp and then set up a few tents. Just when the tents were set up and they hadn't cooked, a group of mutant monkeys suddenly fell from the sky. These mutant monkeys looked like zombies. The rotten flesh on their faces fell down when they moved, which looked particularly disgusting. This group of mutant monkeys came very suddenly without warning. Even Xiao Qing didn't notice how they came. After dealing with this group of particularly disgusting mutant monkeys with great difficulty, Xiao Qing said, go and see if Mu Lianchuan is still in the carriage. Yan Chiua opened the carriage and looked inside. Sure enough, there were only a few vines lying on the ground. Just as she thought, it was a diversion. Sure enough, there was a mastermind behind it. Chapter 590. There was really no one else who could encounter such a scheme while traveling. Xiao Qing patted her head and said, no need to look for them anymore. They must have run away. Anyway, we are full. Let's go. The others did not object and continued to walk forward with her. Xiao Qing originally thought that this matter was over. The person in the dark would be scheming and would not make a move immediately. However, the fact was that not long after they left, they met another person. This time, it was a woman. She was holding a small bag in her arms and looked pitiful. She came over and asked, can I borrow some water? I have been walking for a day and have not found a water source. I really have no strength. Xiao Qing did not say anything and directly stabbed her. The woman made a fake exclamation and then dodged. She said with a wronged face, I just want to drink water. Do you have to treat me like this? Xiao Qing looked at her coldly. After a long while, she had an expression that said, oh, I admit defeat. Then she said, little Chun Chun is right. You are really not a simple person. Sure enough, she knew Mu Lianchuan. This group of people should be in the same group. The power behind them was not simple. They all had the smell of zombies. It was very obvious. Where did this group of people come from? They looked very powerful. This woman was like Mu Lianchuan and even somewhat similar to Xiao Qing. Then the question was, who arranged them? The woman hugged her small bag and said, actually, I am just passing by. You can talk slowly. She wanted to run, but the vines that had been lingering under her feet for a long time quickly drilled out and formed a huge vine whip, which was thrown at her face. The vine whip whistled through the air, looking very ferocious. It fell towards her head. The woman's expression changed. She quickly leaped into the air and dodged the whip. But then, another vine whip drilled out from the ground and caught her off guard. In a moment of carelessness, the bundle in the woman's hand was whipped away. Her expression changed drastically. She actually ignored the vine whip that was whipping her and flew up to catch the bundle. The outer layer of the bag had been broken. After all, it was just the most ordinary cloth. It could not withstand Xiaoqing's attack, and then the thing inside was exposed. It was a skull. Looking at the size of the skull, it should belong to an adult. The woman hugged the skull very carefully. Large pieces of flesh on her face and body were taken away by the vine whip. She seemed to be completely unaware and only cared about whether the skull in her arms was damaged or not. Probably because of luck, the skull was intact. The woman breathed a sigh of relief and hugged the skull tightly. She did not stay for another minute. Xiaoqing calmly watched her escape and said, "It is indeed different. Look at the wound on her face. The skin part is good, but the flesh under the skin still looks like rotten meat that has been left for a long time. Once the skin is not protected, it is all exposed." For example, she and Dummy were the same on the outside and inside. Although there was still little blood in their bodies were not active, and their hearts could not beat. At least under their skin, there was normal flesh. Unlike this woman, there was rotten flesh under her skin, just like the painted skin in the story of Strange Stories from a Chinese studio. Their human-like appearance is fake, but it can be seen that they have intelligence and memory. They are very similar to humans. I just don't know how strong they are. Mulin touched his chin and said, "At their level, it is easy for them to sneak into the survival base." Chapter 591. They're probably at level 6, definitely not at level 7. I'm not sure about the specifics. After all, we haven't had a life-and-death battle, Xiaoqing said calmly. She felt that something was wrong. The feeling that these two people gave her was very strange. It didn't feel like they had risen to level 6 on their own. Instead, it felt like they had gone through a special accelerated method to reach their current strength. Therefore, their strength was actually a little weaker than that of ordinary level 6 zombies. However, their intelligence made up for it. Then the question was, who had the ability to mass-produce level 6 zombies? If someone could really do it, it would undoubtedly be a nightmare for human beings. After all, it was very difficult for human beings to reach level 6. However, the zombies that could be mass-produced were still at level 6 even if their strength was a little weaker. If there was a limit to the production and it couldn't be mass-produced, it would be fine. However, if it could be mass-produced, Xiaoqing could already see the future of human beings. I can feel a special kind of energy fluctuation from them. Yan Qiue frowned and said, "This kind of energy fluctuation gives me a very familiar feeling, but I can't tell what it is. I'm just worried that they're really targeting us." They were quite arrogant in the post-apocalyptic world, but their enemies should be human beings. Most of them were already dead. Why would a nest of zombies suddenly jump out and make trouble for them? They didn't have anything that could make those zombies covet them. I can't think of anything. We'll just deal with whatever comes our way. Xiaoqing wasn't afraid of anything. Yan Qiue nodded. Although they continued to move forward, everyone was vigilant. They didn't feel like they were just having fun like before. When it was almost dark, they arrived at a small forest. This place was very good and very suitable for resting. If they wanted food, they had food and shelter. Their strength was high enough, so they were not worried about encountering any danger in the forest, so they stopped to rest. They didn't encounter anything during the meal. At night, Xiaoqing didn't sleep as usual. Instead, Dai guarded the first half of the night while she guarded the second half. She let Mulin and Yan Qiue rest. Although Dai guarded the first half of the night, Xiaoqing didn't actually sleep. She laid in the tent and opened her 5 senses to listen to the surrounding sounds. She sensed if anyone was approaching. She had an indescribable feeling that tonight wouldn't be so quiet. When night came, she couldn't sleep. After lying in bed for half a day, she got out of the tent and sat with Erdai. As soon as she sat down, she heard a faint rustling sound in the wind. It seemed like something was coming. She pricked up her ears and listened carefully. The sound was getting closer and closer. It should not be just one person, or more than one thing. Erdai also noticed it. He opened his eyes wide and stared cautiously at the night in the distance. Can you feel what it is? Xiaoqing asked softly. It might be the monkey we met today. Anyway, it's very small, Erdai whispered. As soon as he finished speaking, he was stunned. Erdai, or more accurately, he was now Fu Jingxin. He seemed to have exposed something just now. Fu Jingxin secretly looked at Xiaoqing's side profile. She didn't have any extra expression on her face. She was very calm, as if she didn't notice his abnormality just now. However, the more calm she was, the more Fu Jingxin couldn't calm down. He felt that Xiaoqing was abnormal. Xiaoqing was a very attentive person. How could she not notice that he spoke so fluently just now? You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.